Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, excellent show we have today. T-Bob, he's going to join us in a little bit. We're going to talk all things LSU. We've got the jersey contest. I am wearing a jersey that I'm not going to reveal who it is just now. If you're just listening to this in podcast form, you should go subscribe to our YouTube channel right now if you want to get a little look. But I'm going to save that for later. And we're going to also have some thoughts on the back end after the interview about Herbie and the Dylan Raiola situation, all of that. Maybe we'll do a little Super Bowl prediction just for the people as well.
I will say too, when we have T-Bob on here, it's kind of like when we have Liam Cohen on here, because he's like a version of me. He's like a version of me that's a little bit more athletic and can grow a beard, so it's going to be like 10% different when you switch from this to the interview.
More chess talk with T-Bob. Mm-hmm. More chess talk for sure. And that's chess the game, not like chest. I realize that can sound a little bit different. But yeah, great stuff with him. Of course, would expect nothing less. But obviously the big news this week will rest in peace, Toby Keith. When we found that out on Monday morning, I believe, Tuesday morning it was, tagged in a few tweets about that. Obviously somebody that we've talked about on this show a lot, the How Do You Like Me Now games, that is become part of the vernacular of the Saturday Down South podcast. We talk about Toby Keith games. Whenever we bring up a Toby Keith game, that's what we are referring to. So in case you are maybe a new listener of this show, it's pretty self-explanatory. I explain later to T-Bob what a Toby Keith game is, because it's not necessarily just your most impressive win. It is, we said and thought certain things about you, and then you went out and proved people wrong with this win. Just like Toby Keith proved his not ex-girlfriend. I shouldn't say that.
Ex-love interest?
Ex-love interest. That's what it was. Ex-crush. Lauren's got a point about that, by the way. She has maintained, and Lauren has loved this song way longer than I have. She grew up on How Do You Like Me Now in ways that I can't speak on. Like I might have heard it a few times. I didn't really get into it until way later, until I was probably 19 or 20. So very, very much late in the game. I can admit that. But Lauren's point has always been that it sounds like Toby Keith harassed this woman. And I can kind of get her side of why she wasn't into it. I'm just saying, like, everybody has a How Do You Like Me Now person in mind. I've got like 6 in mind that I could rattle off that we don't need to get into, some of which are in this industry, some of which are not. But like, everybody's got that person. For Toby Keith, it was a person that, look, I think if he could do some of those moves differently, I think he would have. But I don't really look back on that whole situation and go, I wonder why she wasn't smitten on Toby Keith. She should have been.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. I was listening to that song the other day, when I heard the news, and I went, yeah, I could see this guy being kind of annoying, actually. Like, if you see the other perspectives, that's a good note. That's why you got to have the woman perspective sometimes. Be like, yeah, I could see myself talking about this guy to my friends and be like, still feel like I dodged a bullet there.
This guy was basically playing pranks on you. I mean, he wrote your number on the 50-yard line.
He said, call for a good time.
Seriously. He took it a step further by doing that. Now you're like, hey, your husband sucks and he's never home. And now it's me on your radio. Like, I'm just saying, Toby he's a very jaded, scorned lover, if you want to call it that. But yeah, it's a banger. It's a banger. I heard it probably 4 times on Tuesday alone, and every single time you can't not sing along to that song. I was going through all the different Toby Keith songs, some of which like I like a little bit of his older stuff. And I even remember the newer song that I always had an appreciation for, though, is Red Solo Cup. I mean, the first time I heard one of my buddies singing Red Solo Cup, I didn't know that it was a Toby Keith song, because I just heard my buddy belting it out a cappella. My college roommate would come home and he'd be like, just singing Red Solo Cup. And I thought it was like a modern, like hip hop song or something like that. And then I heard on the radio.
I literally, in the back of my head, was like, it's not exactly hip hop. I wouldn't call it, but a good example. Have you ever heard Life's Been Good by Joe Walsh?
I haven't heard that. I know a different Joe Walsh.
That song.
It's weird to hear you talk about Joe Walsh in that context. There's a Joe Walsh that I knew very well from high school, and you always call him by his full name, Joe Walsh.
There you go. Yeah. This is Joe Walsh from the Eagles. I would encourage you to check this. This is one of my mom's. My mom put me on this song. I was like, oh my gosh, this song slaps. But it's like spoken word in a way. It's not exactly like a song. It's like somebody just spitting, you know?
Just spitting, nothing but fire. But yeah, Toby Keith getting a whole lot of love on Tuesday. And, I thought we'd give him some love on the pod today just by doing Toby Keith games, the ultimate Toby Keith game for every current SEC head coach, some of which we have probably said in the moment, Toby Keith game, and others have maybe slid under the radar a little bit, or they weren't in the SEC at the time when they had it. But I thought that'd be a fun way to honor the late legend, which, man, it's such a bummer to think that Oklahoma is coming into this conference and, McConaughey is going to come in with Texas. And so he's going to be part of the SEC culture in a new way. And it's a shame that Toby Keith's not going to be a part of that. Somebody that's obviously very synonymous with Oklahoma football and just the state of Oklahoma in general.
LSU has just claimed Garth Brooks. I don't care where he's from anymore. Anyway.
Look, I think that LSU has a weird variety of people that are very closely associated. Like
Van Pelt is a good example, where it's just like, actually, I mess with these people. It's a fun place to be.
True. Rosillo, big LSU guy as well. But yeah, there aren't a whole lot of people more synonymous with Oklahoma than Toby Keith.
Yep.
Just seeing him on the sideline before the Peach Bowl 2019 against LSU. Yeah. Marler had the courage to go run after him and get a selfie with him. And I was like, can't do it. Just can't quite do it. Didn't really want to. I don't know if it wasn't an ego thing. I mean, I loved plenty of
You were on the clock. Yeah, you didn't want to bother. I feel it. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it just takes Devin Hester for me to want to do that to anybody. All right, let's start with Kalen DeBoer. The ultimate Toby Keith game for Kalen DeBoer is the 2023 Pac-12 championship. Beating Oregon with Washington. Beating Oregon the second time. I got so sick.
The third time in a row. They don't want you to know that it never happened for Lanning.
You are exactly right. The third time that he beat Oregon in a 2-year stretch when he was at Washington. And everybody kept hearing, and look, we talked about it on these airwaves as well. Well, Washington won the first game against Oregon, but, Oregon's the better team because they passed the eye test. It was one of my least favorite takes of the 2023 season. I say that even as someone who, look, I picked Washington to go to the playoff, but I was kind of critical of what they did the second half of the year, and they didn't look like the same team that we saw in the first part. But Oregon continued to be praised for how it dominated lesser foes, and for a bit, I kept thinking, wait a minute, your best win is at Utah without Cam Rising. Let's keep that into perspective here when you're destroying these teams. It was such a foregone conclusion that Oregon would win the rematch in the Pac-12 championship, and instead, Washington beat Oregon at its own game. Dylan Johnson, the Mississippi State transfer, was remarkable that night. He had a $152 on the ground. Showed that Washington was not just this finesse team. And I push back on you when you say that Washington did not deserve to win the Joe Moore Award and that they won it because of scheme, because they could do things like that, but they didn't have the depth in the backfield. They had Michael Penix at quarterback and 3 NFL-ready receivers. Yeah, it makes sense, like why their style was the way that it was. But to me, that night was what clinched them the Joe Moore Award, and it showed that group had a little bit more versatility. Why Kalen DeBoer is pretty freaking good at this. And here's a question that I ask. Does he get the Alabama job if he loses that game and Washington misses out on the playoff?
I think the hay was in the barn for him. I mean, the Sark win was very nice, but I think by that point, that's one of those, like, I guess we'll never know, because who he is the person that wins that game. I that's why Bama liked him. And it's funny because I feel like I have been a little bit negative about Kalen DeBoer. I loved Kalen DeBoer at Washington. You know that. I mean, I was a stan for Kalen DeBoer, and I'm glad that we could talk about real games that happened, because I felt crazy. I felt like I was by myself going, what makes y'all think this Oregon team at this point deserves to be on the field with Washington after the way that Washington has continued to dominate them, continue to prove they're the best team in the Pac whatever. I guess technically the Pac-12. They have proven. And it was just so cool to see. And it's so funny because Lanning and DeBoer are just such opposites. Lanning, the guy with the SEC ties, great recruiter, big rah-rah guy. But DeBoer is this assassin in this game. I mean, just schematic genius. You see him on the sideline, like he's focused, he's locked in. He's not doing the, rah-rah, Sam Pittman, Coach O stuff. He's sitting there just doing his job. He's clocking in. Beating Oregon, yeah, this is like your company party. You're expecting it. It's part of his life at this point.
I like Dan Lanning too, but if you're giving me a coach ranking right now that has Dan Lanning ahead of Kalen DeBoer, I'm scratching my head going, to just football does not matter? Because both 2-year guys and both did phenomenal things, but having that 3-0 advantage, man, that was a big, big moment for him and what he's trying to build. As weird as it is to say about a coach in his late 40s, but he is a coach that is on the rise, very much so, and it definitely set up his next opportunity. Sam Pittman, 2021 Texas is his Toby Keith game, his ultimate Toby Keith game. Could have gone 2020 Mississippi State, thought about that at the time. I definitely called it a Toby Keith game for him. A great candidate because anytime a program wins an SEC game for the first time in over 1,000 days, you get How Do You Like Me Now cranked up to 11 on that jukebox. All right. That is what we're here for. And the timing of that was significant because of a certain record-setting performance that happened in Death Valley with Mississippi State against the defending champs a week earlier. I didn't choose violence.
No, but you're right. They really respond, like, based on what we thought at the time, like SDS was selling shirts, for the area. That the story was Mississippi State is great, not Bo Pelini is trash after a week because they broke the record, like it was that they looked unstoppable.
But I'll instead go with the year 2 game that Arkansas had against Texas because that win, even though it didn't age particularly well, Texas goes 5-7. The timing was crucial. In the SEC, we watched Pittman in year 1 exceed expectations. But it was still a 3-win season, albeit a COVID season against all SEC competition. I don't know how many 3-win seasons have ever improved someone's approval rating in a significant way on the national level. It's not a whole lot. It's a little bit tougher. So in year 2, Texas coming into Fayetteville for a primetime showdown. Texas is a touchdown favorite as the number 15 team in the country. And what happened? Sam Pittman's team ran wild. My lasting
hog
image,
wild.
They were hog wild. God, how did I miss that? Goodness gracious, Connor, be better. The lasting image I have of this game is a freshman Rocket Sanders taking a handoff late in the 3rd quarter, and he takes it to the right side, and then all of a sudden he sees the cutback lane. And once he sees that cutback lane that was made by that Sam Pittman coached offensive line, he turns it upfield, and you watch him just carry a Texas defender 10 yards into the end zone because he wanted no part of actually doing what it took to tackle Rocket Sanders and basically the entire Arkansas fan base that night. And it was a dagger in that game. Year 2 of the Sam Pittman era was a perception changer, and it took form that night, even more so than year 1 when he exceeded expectations, but maybe didn't necessarily change the entire narrative of who Arkansas was nationally.
Yes, and as we're going through this, I'm realizing that Pittman has a couple of these. I think last year's Florida game was a good example of one of those where they had never won there, and it was like, oh, this team's out of it. They can't make a bowl. Now, they obviously didn't end up winning the following game, but for that day, it was like, yo, like this is why we're sticking with Sam Pittman because he can get the boys playing. And I think that's the story of Sam Pittman is that whenever he's on your side, you feel like you got a chance. The guys love playing for him, and I think Texas, especially at that point, and we can kind of project or kind of look back, and it's even crazier now, seeing what Steve Sarkisian has done, all that, the brand of Texas saying, okay, we're the Longhorns, we got all this money, we got whatever. And Sam Pittman's like, how do you like me now? I don't care. I got a hog statue. None of that means anything to me.
When I close my eyes and picture who are the most likely coaches to actually sing this song in a post-game celebration, Buddy Pittman's at the top of the list.
Yep.
It is him. He would belt that out, holding on to some nice cold beer. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever. But yeah, that night was very, very significant in what he was trying to build. Hugh Freeze. 2014 Bama. This is pretty obvious. It's the Katy Perry game. Everybody remembers it as that. It's the first time that the Grove had ever hosted College Game Day. We know how crazy it was beforehand, but just as for the game itself, Hugh Freeze in year 3, and it's really year 2 with that very decorated, too good to be true class that had Treadwell and Tunzel and Kandichi and those guys. That place
I can't even make that joke anymore because it's all legal now. They're not punishing anybody. So you know what? Good job, Hugh Freeze.
Too good to be true at the time. I think he'd probably still have some of that back because that was ultimately what led to his demise with the uncover. Yeah, we don't need to go there. But that place was bonkers. And Ole Miss, number 11 in the country at the time, only the second time they had been ranked that high since the tricky Dick Nixon administration. Who can forget?
People forget. Not you,
I don't forget. No, trust me. What's easy to forget about that game is how poorly Ole Miss started. You think all of that crowd juice, that energy in that place, and you're going to get out to the races, and you're going to – no. All of that hype, and Hugh Freeze's offense did not score a touchdown in the first half. And Bama goes into the break with a double-digit lead, and they just clawed back. That's all they did that night. They clawed back. Bo Wallace plays out of his mind. That Ole Miss defense was incredible. That Ole Miss defense held Derrick Henry to 17 carries for 37 yards. That's insane. That's got to be the
Sharks, man. They made that stuff look cool.
That's got to be the first time in his career to that point that he had a night that frustrating. Like at no level of football, he's like the guy who averaged 37 yards a carry in high school. To get that volume and to be that held in check is wild.
It's taken until this year for him to have like 5 of those games in his career, honestly. They'll go away from him sometimes, but the concept of we're giving the ball to Derrick Henry and he's not moving forward, there's not been many of those.
Crazy. And that game was supposed to be like the, Ole Miss, you had your fun. The adults are here now. Go fade into obscurity like you always have done. And instead, this game was anything but that. And I remember watching this game. Guy that I was friends with in high school went to Ole Miss, which is wild to think, like suburbs of Chicago end up in Ole Miss. That just doesn't typically happen. He was an athlete. I think he was cross country there for a bit, cross country or track, one of those two things. He was a distance runner. And it wasn't a 2013 Auburn type season from Ole Miss, but in that moment, you thought maybe this could be that and coming to fruition. And that night ends up not being really a fluke, especially when Ole Miss does the same thing to Bama in Tuscaloosa the following year, which gave us one of the flukiest plays in college football history, even flukier in my opinion than the prayer at Jordan-Hare, because instead of one instance in which it should have been a turnover, that play had 3 instances.
Sure did. Yeah.
It should have been a turnover. I watched that earlier today again. Like that just doesn't make any sort of sense. Like you could try and simulate that play 100 times and it still probably would never end up like that. Just absolutely bananas. But somewhere high on Hugh Freeze's resume is the fact that he's going to be the last coach to beat Saban in consecutive years. He's always going to have that. Not Dabo, not Kirby, not Les, not Coach Joe, not Urban, not Gus, not Jimbo. Hugh Freeze, he gets that. It is just good enough to be a bar trivia question of who's the last coach to beat Nick Saban in consecutive years. Because you have to go further back than you would think. 2014, 2015, that is a how do you like me now feat. And it is definitely, I don't want to say 100%, but it has probably played a significant portion in opening the SEC doors back up to Hugh Freeze.
See, this is why I love talking to you about this stuff, because I would say the 2015 game is that. Because I think, like you said, beating Alabama, it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. But, some teams have beaten Alabama. But that second time, when you got to go to Bryant-Denny Stadium, when you got pictures of you all over the locker room and Saban's making the boys run in the offseason going, y'all lost to Ole Miss. I can't believe. And then they go in the Bryant-Denny and they hung 43 on that defense. That was the middle of Joyless Murder Ball. They went in there, and furthermore, they beat the stew out of them. Like they went up 24-10. It went up like 30-17.
Bama scored 2 touchdowns late to make that.
Yeah. It was almost like and you never know with Bama. We saw that with Tennessee this year. Sometimes they just be coming back, but those did feel like academic touchdowns at the time. Like it was in 2014. It was like you said, it was like tight. Okay, now we're gonna explode. Ole Miss came out first half of 2015 like, we've been better than you, dog. And they were. They were wire to wire better. And so, like, that was just a fun little, like that was one of the most fun, non-LSU games I've watched for me, because it was, back and forth and just super cool. And watching this great play caller who's doing the oh shucks thing. I don't know if I still know how to be a play caller. But back then, there was no better man on earth than Hugh Freeze.
You bring up a good point. Hugh Freeze had to show the world, I can beat Bama without Katy Perry. Watch me. I'll do it. Dare me. I promise you I will. Game day was in the house for the second one too, because they were in Tuscaloosa for that. So yeah. Look, I think we can agree. Hugh Freeze's How Do You Like Me Now game is just against Bama. It's one of those 2 Bama games at the very least. Yeah,
also, Swag Kelly, 341, 3 tutties, 10.3 average. That boy was slanging that thing against Nick Saban in 2015.
I think 66 of those came on that fluke play.
Yep.
So take that for what it is. Everybody's got to catch a break every once in a while.
Yeah.
Billy Napier, you know where I'm going with this one probably. It's 2022 against Utah. And there's another candidate that we'll get to, but I think that's got to be it. It's probably not a great sign when your Toby Keith game is the first game that you coached at that team.
Yeah.
Not great. Not ideal. Probably not a great sign when your future first-round quarterback also looked like he might have peaked in that game, and not necessarily because of the script that you had for him, but because of what he did on improv plays. Just something that I've thought about. But at the time, huge for Billy, because that was the type of football that he wanted to play. The physicality, the toughness, the endurance that his team played with to outlast an established Utah program who does all of those things. That's what we praise Kyle Whittingham's program for. That was everything Florida and Billy Napier specifically hoped it could be on that night. And I remember watching that game in the Mercedes-Benz press box after Georgia just tail whipped Oregon that day. And I was the last person in that press box because I was, admittedly invested in my Utah preseason playoff pick and all that stuff. But I wanted to see what Florida was doing. I mean, it was incredible to be able to watch. I was amazed at how they came out in the Swamp, because let's remember the 2 previous games that they played in the Swamp before that. As much as we talk about how great that atmosphere is and how Florida, you just can't doubt them out in the Swamp. The 2 previous times that they took their home field was that messy, disastrous FSU game where both teams were fighting for bowl eligibility. Mm-hmm. Dameon Pierce was incredible that game, but the rest of it, you're kind of like, this was a slop fest. And then the game before that at home, they had the Mizzou game in between, but before that was the Samford game, was 70-52. The game that they won, I put in air quotes, after they finally fired Todd Grantham, and he's probably sitting at home watching Samford put up half 100, just cackling to himself.
Yep.
So look, that night in the Swamp, the debut for Billy was huge. Maybe it gave him a little bit too much false confidence. It's like when you win your first bet, when you're of age to be able to do that, and then you just think for the rest of your life you're this unbelievably good bettor. Maybe there was a little bit of that with Napier. But still, that was important. I almost went with the 2023 Tennessee game. Almost went with that. I think the timing of that was huge because you're 2 weeks removed from the Utah loss to open the season when everybody's calling for Billy's head. And it's a game that game was on national television. And a couple weeks later, you kind of showed, hey, we still have Tennessee's number. There's a reason why the Vols haven't won in the Swamp in a couple of decades. But this is the challenge, though, and this is why this is a bit more difficult than maybe the average person would realize, is that we know how short-lived that flex was because of what happened against Kentucky a couple weeks later. And I guess you could say the same thing about the opener against Utah. So Kentucky's always just been there.
Kentucky's always there waiting to just step on you real quick. I mean, this game specifically led to, I'll allow Florida fans to laugh at me for a second. So I'm in New Orleans. You remember this? I had just survived a car wreck. I'm sitting there in a restaurant called Couchon in Louisiana. I'm sitting there. We're having a nice meal. I'm watching a little bit of the Florida game at this nice meal because me and my boys are all sickos. We're all watching, and we're like, there's no way. There is just no way they win this game. Next day, we go to the LSU game. I'm sitting there, and it led to the phrase that me and my boys always joke about, me going, I got to find something else to make myself happy for the next couple of years because it's not going to be this. Because I really thought, like, oh, we could have hired Billy Napier. We got this dude, right? He looks unprepared. Keyshawn Moody's deleting his Instagram and subtweeting us. We're so cooked. And then we're looking back 2 years later. But it felt real. Like, it really, in that moment, felt like Brian Kelly is same old guy. Billy Napier is new offensive genius. Because that's how they looked in that game. They looked scary.
It's amazing how the college football regular season can shape perspective that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
In no other sport can we talk about that, about the first game of the season having that much of an impact to talk about, man, we messed this hire up, or man, we nailed this hire.
And the trenches, they were pushing those dudes around in that Florida game. I remember looking, being like, they look small. Florida looks angry. They look ready to go. Now, it's hard to do that with the depth they had over the course of a 12-13 game season. But, you know, for a day, they looked like they had the perfect scheme, perfect motivation. They were good to go.
And the strength of that Florida team in year one was the offensive line. And that ended up being what they would kind of hang their hat on. They obviously had too many other holes to be able to end up having a winning season that year. But for one night, man, it felt very, very real for Florida and for Billy. Kirby, 2021 title game. And yes, it's the 2021 season, so it's the 2021 title game. Don't give me this BS of like, it's the 2022 national champion. No, get out of here with that stuff. You could argue that the 2017 Rose Bowl against Oklahoma was that game for him. It was always, though, always, no matter what, it was going to come down to whether or not Kirby could end the 1980 jokes. And that still was the question was still being asked after the fact. As great of a win as that was, and the comeback and all the things that they did that night, when Georgia fans had just always told themselves something is going to get in the way, the real change in perception of Kirby is beating Alabama in the national championship.
Let me ask you this question real quick on the Oklahoma game. Do you think, and like Georgia fans, you'll definitely get at me, this is a genuine question I have. Looking back on that 2017 game, and like put yourself there. Like, don't think about now, don't think about all the wins. There. Would you have rather lost to Oklahoma in overtime and not play that championship game against Alabama?
Then what's okay, so you've presented one scenario as opposed to what
beating Oklahoma and then losing the way they did against Alabama in 2017.
No. You want to get as many chances to take hacks at the champ. That's what you want. Even though the pain that ensued, and I can admit, I'm not looking at this through the perspective of a Georgia fan, but I would assume, man, even if you knew that 2nd and 26 was going to happen, you have to get there. You got to get there. You got to. You have to sit down and have a chance at the table, even if that means pain, because pain can fuel something very special. And there's something about being that close and knowing what that taste can be like. So I don't think they would change that path.
Yeah. See, I wish Georgia had just beaten LSU in 2011 and I didn't have to deal with that because that was horrible. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair. That's perfectly fair. I think there are some instances in which you could say that, but for that one, no. I think you had to get on that stage and you had to actually experience that. But yeah, I remember that atmosphere at Lucas Oil. Like it's the most tense that I have ever seen at a sporting event that I've been at. I saw a Super Bowl in that building 10 years earlier, an all-time Super Bowl, might I add, Giants-Pats, that came down to a Hail Mary. And this game was better in terms of every play feeling like it was going to be legacy-defining stuff. If Kirby had lost to Saban for the second time that season with that team, with how historically great that defense was, he would have been skewered. Absolutely skewered. I don't know if that 2022 team comes back nearly as focused. As weird as that sounds, because of all that they lost, the 15 players in the NFL draft, and you'd think, oh, first national championship for the program in 41 years, they're going to have a championship hangover. I actually wonder if the opposite kind of proved to be true. And we have the benefit of hindsight to be able to say that, but I don't know that they win one in that stretch if that night doesn't go the way that they had hoped. The A.D. Mitchell touchdown grab, the Keely Ringo pick six, those are iconic plays that might have changed the entire trajectory of Kirby's career. I truly believe that. And how much was at stake that night? That was the exhale moment for Kirby as a head coach. There's no doubt about it from my perspective.
Yes. No, this is one of the all-time How Do You Like Me Now games. I mean, the history of college football in terms of the Georgia, getting that off their back, especially thinking about, I mean, it hadn't happened since. I think that if that game does not go the way it does, those two coaches are viewed. And again, it's always a little bit of hindsight with these type of things because, if Georgia beats Alabama in this year's SEC championship game, that's one of the greatest passing of the torches ever. Now, Nick Saban had other plans. The conspiracy he's running behind the scenes to never lose. But point being, I think, just the script of that game, the Stetson fumble just felt like it was this is just so, it was the most apex, this is how you lose to Alabama. It was okay, we're barely hanging on, we're barely scratching and clawing. At that point, the game was 13-12 for UGA. It was any play could have gone either way. We need you to just get down the field. And this is late in the game too. You know what I'm saying? It's we need to just get down the field, do something to where we could just weather the storm. But it's buddy, I'm going to do the opposite of something. We're going to do this. We're going to give up an 18-yard touchdown drive immediately after we're going to be losing. And then, like we said, that's it. When you play Alabama, that's it. You had your chance. See ya. That's it. But of course, like you said, Keely Ringo had other plans. Of course, you know what I'm saying? And I think that, against Bryce Young, against, these great Alabama players, Will Anderson, these guys that are studs that are super villains if you're a Georgia fan. That is, look at this. Look at Bryce Young. He's this crazy five-star. He's been able to sit in college football. When are you even able to do that, to just sit there and learn? This guy's coming, he's won the first Heisman-winning quarterback at Alabama. Oh, my gosh, this guy's unstoppable. And we got Stetson Bennett. This dude's out here fumbling. Our fan base can't agree if he's good or not. Because that's the thing. So many Georgia fans are talking to me about the Stetson thing. And I'm here's the thing about Stetson. Everybody was right. At the end of the day, if you felt that Stetson had that dog in him and whatever, you're probably in the minority among Georgia fans in 2021 when the real decision was made. But if you were I don't know about this guy. He doesn't have that pedigree. He doesn't have all this stuff. And in that moment, it looked Bama has this juggernaut. We have Stetson Bennett. This is just not going to go our way. But those were the moments, and we've talked about his passer rating Stetson's in these big moments. We've talked about he was able to lead his team, execute the offense, and he was not a game manager. He was a game changer. That's one thing about Stetson. And, I think that it was just so instrumental to say, all right, I don't care about any of this history. I don't care about any of this stuff. We're about to whoop these boys from here on out. After this touchdown is given up, we're going to rally the troops.
The moment that Kirby agreed to become Georgia's head coach, returned to his alma mater, the only Toby Keith game that was going to ever exist for him was beating Saban in a path to a national championship, whether that was in an SEC championship or in a national championship, a playoff semifinal, something like that. That was going to be the only opportunity for him to ever say, how do you like me now? That was it. There was beating it, as great as those LSU teams were, it was always going to be about that. And he did it. And there were so many people at different points that thought it could never happen. And now it feels so inevitable with Kirby in ways that it definitely did not at the time. So I think that's a pretty easy one. I don't really think there should be a whole lot of debate on that. Okay, Mark Stoops. 2018 at Florida. Another obvious one. It's got to be. Big one. Talked about this the other day with the Stoops legacy and why we think this could be entering the final chapter for him at Kentucky. You end the 31-year losing streak against Florida. You do so in their house. Your defense is insanely good that night. Josh Allen, go back and watch that game. Josh Allen played one of the great individual games that I've ever seen from an SEC defensive player, at least in the playoff era. I mean, he was everywhere, even in coverage. The dude was incredible. And entering that night, Florida had all this buzz. It was Mullen's SEC debut with Florida. Gators were somehow inserted back into the top 25, even though they opened with an FCS team after a 4-win season. I didn't like that. I was banging the drum that Florida did not deserve this love at this point of the season. But it was a huge, huge day for Kentucky in starting this new expectation. The lasting image from that game is my guy, Cash Daniel, with the stone cold move as Kentucky's celebrating. And it was a day that changed what Kentucky fans thought was possible. In year 6, Stoops set the stage to finally have a year unlike any since he had been there, and really unlike any that they had in the entire 21st century. And that's what he was able to do by beating Florida and not, once again, as we mentioned the other day, being the Charlie Brown football gets taken out as you're trying to send it through the uprights. But that was a game-changing day for Stoops in what he was trying to build at Kentucky.
Yeah, and to your point, like, this is when this stuff really rings true, right? Which is, they got a winning record against Florida since then. Like, that really was a culture shift, and
yep.
Stoops is another guy who I can see him really loving this song, singing it to himself. He's up there with Pittman, and a lot like Pittman too, because he's a little bit mercurial. He can have some of these up and down performances. He has about one of these a year. Like last year, the Louisville game, I think, was that as well. Yeah. Them coming off like, oh well, you guys, we got football from here on out. It's like, maybe not, brother. I'm still Mark Stoops. So yeah, I that's his MO. But you're right. I think that Florida thing. What was that streak at? It was so just obscene. It was like
31 years. 31. Yeah.
Oh goodness. Yeah. I mean, that's old school college football right there. That could never. Now with transfers and everything, you end up like Kentucky has now. A Vandergrift or something coming in. But every beloved Kentucky fan, every player could not beat this team. Didn't matter. I mean, we could say, what was it, like the bad Florida teams? Like there were those couple of like 4-win Florida teams, and they always beat Tennessee and they always beat Kentucky. And those streaks stayed alive despite they were horrible until these last couple of years. And I think that's a big deal.
That's how you get people to think differently about your program. Mm-hmm. You have to do that, and doing it on the road too. I think that was significant. The timing of it, because if it's in Lexington, it's a little bit different, but doing so in the swamp and silencing that play, something that Mark Stoops has now done multiple times, I think was very, very pivotal for him. All right, let's talk about your guy, Brian Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2022 against Bama.
Yep.
This is a case where I think you could point probably to better wins on Kelly's resume, including 2020 Clemson, even though Trevor Lawrence out with COVID that day, a little bit different. I would also throw in the 2012 win that Notre Dame had at Oklahoma. That's what actually set the stage for them to be able to make a national championship run, even though obviously they didn't have a conference championship to be able to play in. But like how much that team kind of played with fire, that was where they really kind of asserted their dominance on the road. That game was closer than what the final score indicated, but I thought that was a really impressive win for that team, and one that was easy to forget when they're like out here struggling against Purdue and stuff like that. Yeah. But beating Bama was always the goal when Kelly took that job, just like we talk about with Kirby. There are certain places where that is a realistic hope, expectation that you will do, and it will define your time. Beating Bama and getting to Atlanta was something I never thought would happen in year one of the Kelly era, especially with how close that Bama team coming into 2022 was to being a unanimous preseason number one. Bama played with fire that year. We talked about that a ton. So they were destined to get burned at some point, probably for that second loss. But Kelly's "How do you like me now" moment is going for two with Jaden on that play to Mason Taylor that had to be timed so perfectly. And if anything is off there, we're talking about Brian Kelly in a different way after the fact. And, oh, man, this is why you're never going to win the big one. And this is still hanging over him probably at this point. If he loses that game, he obviously doesn't get to Atlanta. Maybe Bama is playing with house money in the SEC championship. The Tide get revenge after losing to Georgia in the title game in Kirby Smart's Toby Keith game. I don't know. There could be a variety of things that play out. But Kelly ended Bama's playoff hopes with just the ultimate cojones, "How do you like me now" move.
Yeah, I think, speaking about that same season, right, it started with that disaster against FSU. It started with Kayshon Boutte. It started with Brian Kelly dancing on the recruits and everybody saying he's from the North and he says family weird and all this different stuff. And, there were some just weird happenings to start that year. The Mississippi State game was a weird game where they needed a fourth down, to do that. And and you see the offensive line snapping the ball over guys' heads. They can't get it going. Jaden Daniels is this guy from out west that SEC fans didn't know a ton about. And it was like, what's this guy going to do? There was still a quarterback controversy. I'm not going to get into that. But point being, like, do we trust Brian Kelly? And I truly believe that the media campaign, because Brian Kelly is not likable, I understand it. It's because he's a jerk. Like, it's not like there's a conspiracy. It's because Brian Kelly's a jerk. It's because when you talk about all these other Brian Kelly wins, I'm sitting there going, I was discounting all those wins. I can't remember which ones were impressive because I was trying to find a way that they weren't. And so that's the cool thing is when you beat Alabama, it becomes your best win. I don't got to think about 2012 Oklahoma because then they saw Alabama and had that going. So so that's talking about guys that could never be stopped. Yeah, they were not stopped that day. But anyway, so point being, I think I think seeing that, here's another, since I told the story about the Florida game and how sad that was, I had invited my friends all over for this game, and I somehow caught COVID. And I don't understand how I caught COVID because even Brittany didn't catch COVID. It was just me and her in the house. I really have no idea how I caught COVID. And I invited all my friends and they had to like cancel their plans. And so I remember just sitting there being like, dang, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. We got Brian Kelly where we might get beat down. Cause I remember being excited for the 2018 game and it just being a beat down and thinking, okay, well, no Devin White, but we're going to figure didn't matter. We could have had Ray Lewis. Wouldn't have mattered. And so point being, when Alabama really puts their sights on you and they do that to you, it's a terrible day. I always joke about the CBS song just giving me like war flashbacks because we always end up playing Alabama. And so, the concept of Alabama had LSU's number under Les Miles and then under Coach O, other than the 1 year, right? And then, okay, boom, now Brian Kelly is here. Well, how is he going to respond? How is he going to put his mark on this rivalry? And the thing about Brian Kelly that killed me is that, like I said, people were being subjective about him. It was like, I don't like you, so I want to turn you into a bad coach. And I did the same thing, like I just said. But at the end of the day, when you sit there, you say, like I said, this is now the winningest coach in college football. He belongs on a field with Nick Saban, not in the GOAT discussion with Nick Saban, but who does at this point? Bear Bryant? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that, there are levels to it, and he's closer to a guy like Nick Saban than he is the bum that people were trying to paint him as. And I think that this game, talking about the poetic, think about it. Mason Taylor missing that block on the PAT that lost the FSU game and then catching the 2-point conversion. That's like a sports writer's dream right there.
When Will hits us with a triple table pound,
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If we're talking 2022 LSU Alabama, I will do a table pound. I'm done, hopefully.
Brian Kelly is now the person that I most want to see singing "How Do You Like Me Now." That
in the fakest "How Do You Like Me Now." Oh, sounds like Peter Griffin.
God. It's probably an accurate geographical representation. That's pretty good. I did a little video the other day where I'm singing it in the car. I'm like, how much Southern accent do I turn on right now? What's an appropriate level? I can't go full BK levels, but a little bit. You got to turn it on a little bit. I don't want to just sound like the biggest Yankee in the world. You got to
listen. They can't handle country thunder. All right. They don't know about the outdoor environments out there. You belong.
Buddy, I did 7 years of country thunder. Trust me. I've done my reps, plenty of reps. Jeff Lebby, Mississippi State. Not available. Can't do this one yet. No games as a head coach. If you want to talk about as a coordinator, maybe that 2020 game against Bama where Ole Miss lost 63-48. But we're talking about Toby Keith wins. That's the point today. But gaining 647 yards of offense against the Nick Saban defense, pretty wild, even in a COVID year. Lane got a lot of that credit. Lebby probably was able to get on the map even more so as a play caller when that happened. But again, we'll put a pin in this. We'll circle back. Maybe Jeff Lebby was facing a pretty daunting task year one. They're last in the country in percentage of returning production. Maybe we'll dig into those rankings a bit more next week. The Bill Connolly metric that I love that came out for this offseason. Maybe we'll talk about some of those SEC takeaways next week. But they're last in the country in that. It's a daunting task, but maybe it just sets up for every week to be a How Do You Like Me Now game for Jeff Lebby. That's the good news.
That's the thing. The worst thing you could have is a bunch of returning losers, okay? If you got guys that are scoring 3 points in a game, get those guys out of here. Start over, all right? No reason to give them any time of day. Make your team how you want to, bro. You got it.
Nothing wrong with that. Let's go to Drink. Drink's got a few of these. Plenty.
Oh, yeah.
You could go with 2021 against Florida. That was definitely one of them. The nail in the coffin from the Mullen era, the May the Force be with you game where he throws on the hoodie afterwards. All-time moment, really was. 2022 at South Carolina, just continuing that domination of the Gamecocks immediately after South Carolina had got into the top 25. 2023 at Kentucky, especially after Kentucky jumps out to that early lead. And then it's, Mizzou's, kind of a fraud. They can't win on the road. And then what happened after that? They just dominated Kentucky and took the life out of that place. Could even include the bowl game against Ohio State. Almost went with that because national stage, it's New Year's Six bowl, hadn't been to a New Year's Six or BCS bowl game. You could go with that. But I'm going with Tennessee this past season. That's the game. The stand-on business game is how it will forever be known for Drink. Okay? Whether you like him or not. That's the stand-on business game. The beatdown that Mizzou put on Tennessee in the second half of that one. 2 years after just getting walloped by Josh Heupel's squad. That game had a New Year's Six bowl hanging in the balance, and Mizzou left absolutely no doubt. 36-7. Drink epitomizes how do you like me now? Probably more than any coach in the conference, because while Pittman is the one that you can most picture singing these songs, Drink is the one who claps back the most and is definitely the most likely to text an ex-girlfriend or something like that after a big-time win with a how do you like me now moment. I don't know that Drink has a lot of ex-girlfriends back in his day. He's kind of, I think he and his wife met when he was in high school or something like that, so maybe that's the wrong candidate. But he could definitely have a few of those moments. He is the
But he probably keeps up. He's like, somebody denied me a bank loan when I was 26 years old, the GA. And guess what? I'm rich now. Like, he strikes me as that guy.
Well, look, if whatever you got to do to get you fired up, man. Lord knows he's not lacking any of those sources of motivation. But has a lot of those types of games. I think that is the definitive Toby Keith game for Drink.
Yes, it's funny because you mentioned almost all of them. I randomly went on a little deep dive. Remember Steve Wilkes, man?
Oh, Steve Wilkes still doing prominent things in the NFL.
He is the defensive coordinator for the Niners. And I was talking to one of my buddies about that. I was like, are we going to pretend like he's good now? And he's like, no. It's like actually kind of wild to think about the process of Drake and how, I'm trying to remember. It's at Southeast Missouri State that Petrino was at.
SEMO.
I think yes. Southeast Missouri State. Yeah, they averaged like 8 point something yards a carry for an entire game against Mizzou, and like the fact that it was like so bad, the Army game, and they kind of came back and won, and this long climb to where he's at right now, I think is so cool. The hiring Blake Baker, and like it's like the Lord of the Rings at this point. It's like a trilogy of getting to this point. So yeah, I think this is perfect. Yeah, I think but also the Ohio State game.
Yeah, but that game was huge. That game was really, really important. I think just getting to that place and doing so against a team like Tennessee that had your number. And to that point, it was like, all right, you had this close loss against Georgia. You had a game that was sitting right there against LSU, and you kind of you squandered that one late.
You should have killed Jaden Daniels when you had the chance.
You probably should have. Would have been a good idea. But beating Tennessee and doing so in that fashion, to me, was an even louder statement. Like,
they
beating Ohio State. Them. I mean, they really did. Like that game was totally a one-sided affair. Even though early on it's kind of going back and forth. I still felt like Mizzou was controlling that game early, even if it was like a one-score lead for a bit. But yeah, I think that one even more so than Ohio State.
Yeah, I think for him, it's like, this is this whole season in a way. You know what I'm saying? And when they have played Georgia close at times, they feel like they're almost there. Smoking Tennessee the way that they did. And again, Josh Heupel, kind of a younger guy, a little bit of a new age guy, right? I mean, they might be like similar, but his offense feels more like Gen Z. Like Josh Heupel's offense just feels like, it's a TikTok speed offense. It's either going to score or if you go to the restroom, you're missing something. All right. And so point being, like the fact to just be like, no, actually the way that I'm doing stuff, Kirby Moore, like you said, is a big deal. And like I said, just hats off to the Ohio State win. And I said at the time, I said in the preview, I'm never going to feel bad about Ryan Day's talent level. I think that right now we're feeling that. I mean, the way that if that loss creates, I hate that we've been talking about this already, but if that loss creates an Ohio State national championship where they just went, you know what, we can't do this again. We can't do this again. That will in itself have a big, like ripple effect on the college football picture. So Drink has been a good story. He's been an interesting cat.
The second that Ohio State wins a national championship next year, which I'm not predicting that. I can't do that. I predicted Ohio State to win like 3 titles in the last 5 years. So I won't do that. Mm-hmm. But the second they do, I will have the column ready why Mizzou helped Ohio State win a national championship. That's the SEC spin. There you go. Right there. Brent Venables, 2023 Texas. Really the only one that is significant, in my opinion. This is pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. Let's remember the start that Oklahoma got off to in 2023 was kind of a raised eyebrow. 5-0, nothing but double-digit wins. They were top 4 in the country in both scoring offense and scoring defense going into that game against Texas. And a Texas team that already beat Bama. So it's like, all right, we saw what happened in this matchup last year. Like, I get it. You know, Dylan Gabriel was actually able to play in this one, but still, like, this should be Texas's game. And what happened? I mean, the Venables defense forces 3 turnovers. It didn't matter that they let over, they allowed over 500 yards in that game. Who cares? The 3 turnovers was the story of that game. And to flip that so quickly in year 2 for Venables after just getting embarrassed in year 1, maybe some sneaky hot seat talk for Venables going into year 3 if they don't win that game. If you just simply flip the results of that game and just everything else stays the same, kind of like, is he really going to be the guy? You know, it's the Oklahoma standard. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know if he's shown us enough. But by doing that against Texas, a game that Texas probably should have won, to me, that was a big, big moment to show that Venables, at least for now, belongs in that job.
Yes, 100%. It was the full Venables brand on display. Like you said, the turnovers, the just all-time like walk them down drive by Dylan Gabriel. It's like, okay, we got this UCF coordinator, UCF quarterback. We got this defense. You guys are used to seeing offensive football. We're going to show you how fun smash mouth football can be. And also, trust me on these guys over here. They're pretty dope. So yeah, I think that was just the masterclass of what Venables can be.
I think that he will have more in his future. I don't think that will be the last one if we look at this 5 years from now. But for now, that's clearly the top candidate. About Lane. Lane thought about this for a bit, went back and forth, but it is September 30th, 2023. It is that game against LSU. He is a week removed from losing to Bama after everything was set up perfectly. People like us are talking about how Lane absolutely blew it. I'm on record saying I don't think Lane is ever going to beat Saban again. Pat myself on the back. Perfect. Worked out.
Not wrong. No cold take there.
Nailed another one. Maybe he knew going into that LSU game, the stat that someone might have said repeatedly throughout the entire offseason about Lane having 1 win against a Power 5 team that finished with at least 9 regular season wins. Maybe he knew that, or maybe he didn't. I don't know. I thought about going with the Oregon game back in 2011 because that is overall the better win. It definitely is. It set up USC to start off at number 1 entering 2012 when they had, I think they had like 18 or 19 starters back. It was insane. But timing is everything. And timing is why the LSU game was his How Do You Like Me Now game. Field rushing, you beat a team with top-level talent that wasn't just A&M or something like that. And obviously it had to be a shootout. It had to be that type of game for Lane to truly flex, for him to truly say, see, I am this good. A sneaky one for Lane that I kind of was like, maybe I need to go in a different direction. The 2021 Tennessee reunion is a good one. Old stomping grounds, new and improved version of Lane, hostile atmosphere, obviously. We had golf balls, mustard bottles thrown on the field. The whole deal, we know that. Should we pivot to this one? Is that the better, like the honey? I've done all right. Saying that to the ex, is that a fair thing to say for this one?
Listen, and again, we cannot discount him beating Vince Lombardi himself when he beat Indiana in 2020. However,
I don't like how you said that, Will. I don't like how you said that.
We've been told these are the best coaches in America. He beat those people. We got to give him credit.
You mock my university with the team in the NFL that I hate. And no, I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. I will not stand for that.
Anyway, no. Okay, well, I'm about to go slander LSU because I think it was this one. I think it was September 30th. I was sitting there. I didn't believe. I was texting you saying I don't think they got this one. And I just want to say, it's honesty hour. That hit that Jaden Daniels took is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. I will see that.
It's wild. Like how he drifted, and then all of a sudden it was just boom, takes his head off.
It's everything about Jaden Daniels trying to make a play. And this dude, it's like he ran into a bus. Like it's like he was running and he didn't see a bus. It wasn't like he was stationary. It is so, and that, I mean, there's right there. That's the highlight of the first 11 win season in Ole Miss history. You beat the Heisman winner. Again, had a good game. Never really had a bad game, but with that extra possession mattered, and the freak. Wow, I can't believe I'm doing this voice for Lane Kiffin, but gotta give him credit at that freaking late game execution where he called like 17 runs in a row, and I was sitting here going, this isn't gonna work. Why are you still running the ball? And because he knew he only needed one pass play to work against this Madhouse defense, and he was just sitting there laughing. He was sitting there going, I can get this wherever I want it. This is barbecue chicken. And I was sitting there in hell going, when's it gonna happen? It's this run stuff's working. What they might just run it in, and every part. I mean the BTJ touchdown that was like questionable. They were in games where they're throwing crap on the field. Lane Kiffin is like undefeated. He's like the best coach in America. They were throwing crap on the field for that one because it was a questionable call, and it felt like they had the game lost. It felt like same old Lane Kiffin. Oh my gosh, Jaden Daniels. BTJ. We've seen all this before. I've never seen a late game drive like that one before. That was special because they truly bled all the clock. And again, Jaden got right back down there. Like they gave him, they tried to kill all the clock they could, but he knew exactly that we can't give this guy any time, and they managed that masterfully. So I think that, like you said, after following a season, because narrative matters and all this stuff so much. Following a season where it was, Lane Kiffin, he doesn't really care. How much does he love Ole Miss? How much is he built for the SEC? How much does he want to win when it's hard? He wants to put on a hoodie and take pictures, but does he want to recruit? Does he want to win? Like, be serious. Does he want to be serious was the question we were asking for all of, the 2022 season. And he comes in 23, and I'm like, this guy's not serious. He's not going to win this game. And buddy, did he.
He did. You lose that game. Lane's having a tough spin. We're not having these ultimate off-season good vibes team conversations if you lose that game to LSU. You're not getting to a New Year's Six Bowl. You're not changing the way that people think about you without being able to close out that night. Thought about the verbal meme of Jaden Daniels taking that Ole Miss hit, handshake emoji, Regina George getting blindsided by that bus.
I swear that was the exact image in my head.
Who had a better comeback? Jaden goes on to win the Heisman. Regina George ends up, oh no, she didn't win Spring Fling Queen. Mm-hmm. That went to Caddy Herring. It's Katie. I haven't seen the new Mean Girls yet. I'm just pulling that out of the archives, even without current context. Pretty impressive. No big deal. Shane Beamer had a lot to choose from.
Yeah.
Very tempting to say Clemson in Death Valley 2022. That is the better overall win. But it's got to be that night against Tennessee, man. It's got to be. The timing. You're coming off a game at Florida in which the only touchdown you scored came via Beamer ball, a fake punt touchdown. That team had Liberty Bowl written all over it. 6-4, not going anywhere. Tennessee comes to town. I always tell the story. Marty Smith is trying to hype up the crowd, SEC Nation, and that place is dead. The weather is crappy. South Carolina fans are defeated. They're like, yeah. Look, by the time the lights turned on that night, sandstorms blaring, they were ready to roll. They absolutely were. Spencer Rattler, the scrutinized transfer quarterback, were kind of like, you know what? This thing didn't really work out. Should they maybe go to Luke Doty? We were having those conversations after the Florida game, and then he played one of the best individual games that you will ever see a quarterback play that night. Juice Wells was everywhere. It was incredible. Hendon Hooker gets hurt, obviously. Tennessee did not have a prayer to win that game, even if he had stayed healthy. At the time that injury happened, that game was over as far as I'm concerned. And I know it's the number one offense in the country. Maybe they get into the 40s. Yeah, like, look, I get it.
Get into the 60s.
I get it, but South Carolina wasn't being stopped by anybody or anything. So don't give me this like, oh, Tennessee would have suddenly got defensive stops. They absolutely would not have. Beamer's had a lot of these. He's had a lot of, like, year one against Florida and against Auburn were both big time Toby Keith games where he's got the family there in the post game interview and he's like, hey, I'm making my dad proud. And it's this like inspiring stuff. Like he's got all of that. And I almost went with the Florida game. I almost did because that game 2021, which was kind of in the midst of this free fall for Dan Mullen, where they win 40-17. I mean, they just clubbed them. That game got Grantham fired. People forget that. But I think it was still more about Florida and free fall than it was South Carolina truly changing how people thought about it. That night against Tennessee, they changed the minds of many with how perfect they were on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, that is one of the funniest games I've ever seen in my life. I truly, like, you really pulled up some good memories here because a lot of these games are just like you show up. I mean, that was, I've told the story multiple times, but it was like a pumpkin patch Saturday. It was like, we're going to go mess around. It was the game that Kentucky had that, like, the really, like, the shoot, not the shootout, but the slugfest against Georgia. It was the Florida Vandy game, and it was the South Carolina Tennessee. Actually, one of the better days of SEC football we've seen recently. Like, low-key, because this one, I mean, it couldn't. I had to pull this up. Spencer Rattler, I mean, 6 touchdowns, almost 500 passing yards. I mean, and that, we're in a position, with Tennessee. I mean, they're having their resurgence, right? Like we talked about, and we're like, I'm sure we'll get to that, but, what they finally did, to beat, they beat LSU, they beat Nick Saban. Oh my gosh, they had this loss, to Georgia, but it was like, okay, we might still get in as a 5, or we might still like hop in. We have these great quality wins. We've beaten all these top 5 teams. And then Sandstorm started playing and none of that crap mattered.
All of it fell apart. All of it. That very night. And the Hooker injury obviously was devastating. But yeah, it all just went up in smoke. And to do that on that stage, I think was the moment that Beamer had been waiting for everything to just kind of come together. Again, the Clemson win is a great one because obviously you win in Death Valley for the first time anybody had won in Death Valley since Pat Narduzzi went in there and kissed his kicker right on the mouth right afterwards and was like, man, I love you. And it was, it's 6 years. Like, that's what we're talking about. Like that was, a place where, dreams go to die, as they've said many times about Death Valley. But for him to win in Tennessee, win that game against Tennessee, not in Tennessee, to me, that just felt so significant for a program that really lacked those wins since probably, 2019 Georgia. 2020 Auburn was a big one too. But still, that was in the midst of kind of a lost season. But it had been at least 3 years since South Carolina had a true, like, oh my God, we just took down a contender type win.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, I could literally talk about this game all day. This game was so cool. It was so funny. There were so many elements to it. I feel like there were so many big plays for South Carolina. Like, I had to go pull up this box score just so I could, like, visualize that this actually happened. Like, Juice Wells, the fact that he was just a portal between the 20-yard lines. Like, it was just like, okay, here you go. Yep. And it was 11 receptions for 177 and 0 touchdowns. This boy was just we got something going on.
Oh man, it was incredible.
Yeah, and the fact, I mean, that was, and not to say, obviously that was the whole, the offensive turnover. Like that was an offense that, wasn't very successful. They couldn't get their personnel. That that didn't really. I'm not going to revisit or like revise. Okay, well, that meant the offense was working, but for that day, everybody played their role perfectly. It was like watching the Warriors in 2015. It was like, oh my, or with Durant. I mean, sorry, like where it was like, oh, this guy's locking down the best player. This guy's hitting threes. This guy's doing this. This guy's passing, and it was like every guy was just exactly where they needed to be. And yeah, like you said, I mean, the only thing that gives us pause from truly just laughing like huge belly laugh at this game is the Hendon Hooker injury, which made things so much tougher. For Tennessee, because it's not just a funny thing that was one coach being way more prepared than the other one. It's a sad thing where it's like, well, this now derails Tennessee season, not because they got destroyed, shellacked, but I think that's I think that I can still view this game positively because it's a good thing for South Carolina.
Let's build you back up, Tennessee. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Heupel. It's 2022 Bama, obvious one. They rushed the field. They smoked cigars. They sent the goalposts into the Tennessee River after ending a 15-year losing streak to Bama and beating the greatest coach of all time. If that's not a How Do You Like Me Now win, I don't know what is. If you had just told me that night was the music video for How Do You Like Me Now, I would sign off on that. I would say, yep, that makes a whole lot of sense. The Cigars put it over the top for me. Like that, that is just a peak performance. We are not what you thought we are, and we're going to show the world. Very easy choice for me.
Yes, I fully agree. And back to weirdly crediting people trusting UCF people again. Yeah, I think, this was the vision of Danny White. This was the, okay, we're going to bring this in. It was, oh, you're hiring this guy from UCF. Like, what's going on? Like, I don't know. Oh, Hendon Hooker. Like, what's going on here? Like, it's not that they had some crazy, like, heir apparent quarterback or anything, but it was just like, all of these choices, all of these risks, all of these moments, all of these losses led up to this one giant win. And the fact of, again, feeling like, okay, Alabama, talking about like the kind of crazy sequence of events in this game, this knuckleball that goes in, just every part of it feels like, oh, this is how Alabama gets you, and again, we saw it. I hate to be whatever, but yeah, we saw it this year. We saw it against LSU too, but with Tennessee, it's like, okay, we're beating Alabama, and then they come roaring back, and it felt like that was going to happen in this game, and then suddenly things change. Suddenly, How Do You Like Me Now? Suddenly we don't know who Josh Heupel is. Okay, whoa, we haven't seen this offense before. We haven't seen Hendon Hooker and these receivers and this run game and this speed and this pace and the deep shots and the confidence. And it's like, wow, Tennessee's really building something here. And like we talked about, that sets the foundation for last year, where even without functional quarterback play, they're able to set this floor, right? Because they believe they've seen themselves beat Alabama. They're not backsliding to 6 wins. They're saying, okay, even without, Hendon Hooker, okay, well, we have Yamale Alva. He's next up. Like, this is a bridge here.
You said that with such confidence. Look at you.
Thanks,
that was
man.
Brilliant. Very well done. You say it with your chest.
Thanks, man. But it's like, this is a bridge year. This is not, okay, here's the peak and then here's the valley. This is, wait, when you have a great team like this and these NFL players, this perfect scheme, you don't have that every year. You need to build for the next one. And that's what changed the total course of Tennessee.
I will always be amazed when we look back on that game, the 2022 season as a whole for Tennessee, that Hendon Hooker was a Jeremy Pruitt recruit, a Jeremy Pruitt portal recruit, and that it was not Josh Heupel who handpicked Hendon Hooker. It was Josh Heupel who handpicked Joe Milton. It was Josh Heupel who obviously got Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah.
But the entire conversation with Hendon Hooker was so radically different at the time when he committed to Jeremy Pruitt. It was a very short time. What was it? A year and a half later, whatever it was that we're talking about here, where he's able to celebrate. I guess it was closer to 2 years later, wherein he is the face of college football in this moment, a moment that Tennessee fans, I'm sure, are like, is this just not going to happen in my lifetime? I'm just never going to beat Bama. I'm just never going to beat Saban. And I think Heupel doing that, and doing that before Saban retired, in a season in which Alabama had all those expectations and stuff like that, and handing them their first loss of that year, I think it definitely adds to his legacy. It adds to his resume, and it kind of, I definitely, in my opinion, put him in that $9 million club. And when he got that extension after that 2022 season, that was a huge, huge part of it, is showing that you could do it and hold on that stage.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to just default to games against Bama. Okay, I hate to do that. It is prevalent, and this will fade over the course of time. It will. But with Sark, it is 2023 at Bama. It is. It didn't mean that Texas was back. As great as that win was for Texas, and that Texas was returning, that's what we've established. Handing Saban his most lopsided home loss at Bama is the type of stuff you dream of. It was the way that it happened, too. Sark was brilliant that night. Ewers was as poised as you will ever see a quarterback. That fourth quarter was the type of thing that you usually see Bama do to everyone else. And Texas went into Bryant-Denny and did it to Bama. If he loses that game, and then we just, go on with everything, like loses to Oklahoma, Texas misses out on the Big 12 championship, Sark, even at 10-2, is probably getting not hot seat talk, but did he miss the window talk entering year 4? And is this, oh man, Like if they all of a sudden are 8-4, then he's going on the hot seat going into that season after, and it changes kind of what you think Texas is capable of a program. But instead, you kind of blew those barriers down, and you said, we can do this. Beating Saban, it just puts you in a different stratosphere. It does. Doing so in that place, it's the how do you like me now for the agent, because it gives you the ultimate trump card in those extension talks, which obviously Sark was able to get that raise. It's an easy choice, but it is the right choice.
This is another kind of culmination of a person and a staff's vision, right? Because if you look through, and like yesterday I was looking through, how these playoff teams are built, and Texas is a really interesting one because they really are not that much of a portal team. Like Quinn Ewers is kind of the exception, right? The second entry on this list, A.D. Mitchell. We've now seen him in 2 of these games, right? But if you look at really, like, there's like 25 players that made an appearance in some version of like a Big 12, all Big 12 team, right? And like 4 of those guys are transfers. A.D. Mitchell, Ewers, their punter, not sure if we count him, rotational DT. Who, so it is, and still within that rotational DT from like somewhere random. It's like, yeah, you got these basically 3-star defensive tackles that were balling this year. That was just Bo Davis development. You know what I'm saying? They had these guys that Sark had kind of accrued over his long coaching staff, and they're like the Avengers, and they have all these position coaches that are coming up and saying, okay, you're from here, you're from here, you're from here, and they've all come together to build this like staff. And Texas, who has always had talent, right? Texas has always had talent. They were able to turn the key on that. He walked into a situation with a good amount of talent. It wasn't a dire, horrible situation, but a school, an administration that couldn't decide which songs to sing, an administration that was still missing Mac Brown and Vince Young, that was declaring they were back and then promptly falling off the face of the cliff. It felt like an unwinnable situation, and he built this thing a pretty old school way. He came in there and it was tough, smash mouth football. And I remember talking about it at the time and being like, yeah, Quinn Ewers has got that little bit of chip on his shoulder. He believes in himself. He's maybe like a little bit like the Joe Burrow of this team in a way. But the rest of these guys, these are Texas guys through and through. And they came into Tuscaloosa and they said, hey, you think we're this finesse team from the Big 12? You think we don't play defense out here? We are going to punch you in the freaking mouth. We're going to get these All-American D tackles, just crushing J.C. Latham and making his tape look horrible. We're going to have your quarterback looking terrible to the point where he's going to get benched against USF. We're going to have the world is going to close in on you. Opposite of what you expected to happen. What you expected to happen was Texas is going to come in and puke all over their shoes, and the environment's going to get to them, and the lights will be too bright. But in reality, Texas brought the environment to Alabama, and they were not ready.
It did, and you could say it was a different Alabama team. It's still, I think at the time, like even if you felt like Jalen Milroe had issues as a quarterback, it's just still a different piece. It is still a different beast to go in there and do what they did on that night, and to be able to continue, obviously, to have the season that they did. Now, if they had fallen apart and it's like, hey, they're 7-6, and this is just like, a Bama team that doesn't even get to an SEC championship, we're probably talking about it in a little bit of a different context, but that did not necessarily prove to be the case.
I'll say real quick on that. I know we're going a little bit long here, but as we talk about all these Alabama wins, as a Bama fan, you're gonna be loving this podcast. We talk about all these Alabama wins because it's ultimate respect. Like what Saban Saber retired, it's like, man, everybody has to get over this hump, and some never do. Most never do. But point being, I think Bama got better over the season, but I think the difference in this team and the teams like Tennessee, the teams like LSU, the teams like Auburn that had a chance, right? Even Georgia had a chance, but it started at the end of the game, Alabama and the coaching and the belief showed through. I think Texas would have beaten this Bama team again. I think this Texas team, the way that they pushed Bama around, the way that offensive line, which didn't get better, closed in like a clam around Jalen Milroe for the entirety of the game. I think this team, I respect them more for being able to do this to this Bama team that was able to reel off all these close wins against these teams, because Texas said, no, sir, this will not be a close win. This will be a bad loss.
I think Texas could have beat Bama maybe 6 times out of 10. Maybe 6 times out of 10. And it would have been, I don't think there was any point in the season in which you would have definitively said, and maybe some with Bama bias would definitely say this, but like, oh, Bama wins the rematch easily. there's no point. Texas didn't open the window in that way to make it feel like that was fluky. And that was huge for Sark to do that.
It was the strength of the team. The way that Michigan beat Alabama was up front. It was with their D-line caving in the offensive line. That's why I think Texas would have beaten them a couple more than 6 times, because how are you going to block those guys? They never blocked those guys in the history of that game. They found a way to get around them, but they were still sitting there.
Yeah, it was a bad matchup. Definitely was. Elko, only 2 years to be able to do this, but it's got to be the 2023 opener against Clemson. It is also his best win. It is his first and only win against a ranked foe, which we talked about with our SEC coach Hater Facts. But national TV spotlight, it's Monday night. It's a popular preseason playoff pick, Clemson is, and they just took their will by night's end. Now, it wasn't necessarily a statistical beatdown if you're just looking at the box score, because there were some very bad Clemson turnovers, but by night's end, you could tell Clemson was done. Like, stick a fork in them. They had thrown in the towel. Fans rushed the field. Incredible moment for Elko. It helped bring College game day to Duke for the first time after that for the Notre Dame game, which could have also been, if they had been able to hold on to that one, how do you like me now type stuff. But this is the obvious one. Probably helped him get that A&M job as well, to have the start that he did and to have such a spotlight on him, to feel like one of these guys who was going to get an even better job at the end of year 2.
Elko, it felt like, you're right. This was a massive definitive win, and it stands alone as his how do you like me now game. But there were glimpses of this past that. You talk about the Notre Dame game. The FSU game, I mean, okay, they lost the game, whatever. But not having Riley Leonard, I mean, that was like the first time Duke had led in that series and since some crazy administration. And the fact that he had his team in all of these games and without Riley Leonard, that's the thing, because you really can go
play the first part against FSU, and then he got pulled in that game.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. Is he wasn't right. And that was one of those where it was probably a smart coaching decision to say, hey, we would rather lose this game and preserve this kid. We've not seen that a couple of times where it has cost the kid, is all to say about that. And so I think at the end of the day, I think that is good coaching. I think that at the end of the day, to say we know, so to have this guy that you said, this is our first round draft pick, because that's what he was thought of at the time. He was like this prototypical quarterback, and we're going to lose him from most of the year, and we're still going to be good. Our defense is going to keep us in this game. And again, like the Notre Dame game, same deal. He takes a big hit, he's just not there. So I think the story of that Duke season under Elko could have been completely different if Leonard had stayed healthy, because they had so many opportunities for this, and they just didn't have that guy,
Yeah, it could have been an even better year 2, but ultimately he gets that next big job, that next big opportunity, and it all started with that Clemson win to beat Dabo. Is still in the ACC, a conference that Dabo has totally dominated. That is still a very, very difficult thing to do. It's like, okay, Notre Dame beats Clemson or something like that, or they lose to Tennessee in the bowl game. They lost to South Carolina the year before, but being an ACC team to beat Clemson, well, even as Clemson has kind of fallen off of that national championship level, it's still a very, very difficult thing to do. Clark Lee. It's 2022 at Kentucky. It is his first SEC win. It is also the first SEC win for Vandy during the 2020s decade. Yes, first SEC win since 2019. Go figure that it happened on the road, in the snow, against a ranked Kentucky team in mid-November. None of that I would have predicted. Any of those elements I would have predicted going into the season. So much so that I bought tickets for my brother and his wife. She works at Kentucky. They live in Lexington. And I figured it would be an easy Kentucky win with decent weather, because it would very likely be a day game. And I was wrong on every possible account with that one. So maybe I jinxed it. Maybe I helped get Clark Lee an extension. Maybe I got Ray Davis a richer NIL deal to cross enemy lines, because Mark Stoops admitted what Ray Davis did that day for Vandy against Kentucky helped get him that opportunity with Kentucky. So maybe I also got Rich Gangarello fired, and maybe I brought Liam Cohen back to Kentucky for that one season. I think I did a lot of things by buying my brother and his wife tickets to that game.
There you go. Yeah, I think I would say it's the Florida game. I think that was wild. I think that was one of the craziest games I've seen. The fact that they were able to, I just think at the end of the day, logos matter in the SEC, and I think both of these are close. And when that happens, when you're a Florida team that's seen your team win national championships. You've seen your team be ranked in the top 10 as recently as 2020. You know what I'm saying? You've seen, not 2020, because I think they were like 15 and 21 anyway, or 22. So, but point being, yeah, when you've seen that and they're able to beat that team and make their guys believe, I think that was a really big deal. And it's hard to say with a guy like Clark Lee, who had a pretty, I think, disappointing year last year. It's hard to say.
Very disappointing. There's no other way to sugar. Like he won 2 games and went 0 against SEC competition after getting an extension. Like it was a wildly disappointing year for Vandy.
Yeah, it's just tough because you would love to say these are the kind of wins that you can build in, because not having the one and like you said, breaking the streak is so massive, and then having the second one, just like the Ole Miss thing, saying, okay, this isn't a fluke. So we'll see. All the narratives say that they should have at least stayed at about that level, if not a little bit worse. You lose Ray Davis, that does matter because he's still doing that to Florida. But point being, like I think that it's going to be very interesting next year for him, because where do you go after these 2 barometers?
Those are the only 2 to pick from, and that's the problem.
Yep.
Because those are the only 2 SEC wins that he has so far. And going into year 4, he's on the hot seat. We've talked about that before, and based on the way the portal has gone for him so far, it's going to be very difficult for him to probably get a year 5, especially with that schedule and the expanded SEC. I think that'll do it. That was fun. I love talking about a How Do You Like Me Now game. One of my favorite things that we get to do. It really is. And hopefully that was a little bit more positive. I realized, kind of looking back on the last few episodes, I'm like, I've been a little bit of a downer. I can admit that. We've had a lot of negativity with some of the subjects and predicting when Stoops is going to be out, and why coaching is changing in the way that we view certain assistants, and whether or not they're going to hang it up because they're too rich now. Like, it's good to get back, some positive vibes. We need some positive vibes.
Connor's just getting like pea soup spit up on him, and he's just like getting to his computer to furiously slander coaches.
I don't know, the spit up game. You adjust. It's not so much the food that I worry about. It's like, okay, my right shoulder. Do I care about this item of clothing that I am currently wearing? The answer every single time better be no, because if it's yes, then I've made the mistake and I have nobody to blame but myself. So
adapt or die, brother.
After die. Amen, brother. Amen. All right, let's kick it to T-Bob. We discussed Brian Kelly's year 3 approval rating, defensive changes, Harold Perkins, Nuss, all that stuff. Great stuff, as always, from one of our favorites. And as I always say before T-Bob comes on, maybe if you have kids in the car, save that part for later. We got some adult language on the way. Just, you've been warned. This is your warning. Okay. T-Bob's going to let it rip. That's what he does. So here's T-Bob. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is T-Bob Hebert, the one and only. Got a lot of haters and a lot of homies. First of all, do you know where can you name that song, what I just referenced?
No. If you were to look at my Spotify most played, it's almost exclusively movie soundtracks, and then John Baptiste. So I am not exactly the most musically inclined, if you will. But I am in the top 0.01% of both John Williams and John Baptiste listeners. Not to brag.
What about John Wall listeners? Because it was a John Wall, Mike Jones ripoff. A little Still Tippin' is what we were talking about.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I, too, have been known to tip on fofos and rep them fofos. But it's been a while since I've listened to culturally relevant music. Well, except for Baptiste, because obviously he's fucking killing it. Sorry, am I allowed to curse here? I won't go overboard with it. We'll keep it chill.
We'll keep it chill. I'll put the disclaimer. I'll put the T-Bob disclaimer at the top. I only put a disclaimer in there for you and Van Lathan. I've told you this before. You two are the only ones. Guys. Yeah, it must be a Baton Rouge thing. Yeah, Hester doesn't need it, but you two guys always. We got to have the disclaimer.
No, Jake is still beholden to old media, and it makes sense. He's on serious stuff where he doesn't like evidence of him cursing on recorded audio or video. Like I had him on Snaps the other day, and we tried to get him to say the F word, and he wouldn't do it. We got him to say bullshit. So. Look, I do a daily radio show. Like, I can turn it off. So if you ever need me to turn it off, just let me know. That ain't no problem. It's just
the best person. the best person at turning it off is Chris Doering, like hands down. He is unbelievable at flipping that switch. Like literally, I have watched him on the set at SEC Network, and then like 5 seconds later, he's dropped 3 F-bombs. And I'm like, you cut it close in ways that I can never dream of. But you know what? It's you guys are pros, and you're able to
having Doering on snaps the other day was man, he really was like a young colt that got to run free. You know, he was finally getting to talk about the things in the manner, talk about the things that he wanted to talk about, and talk about them in the manner that he wanted to talk about. So that was a lot of fun.
Let's start with what something that I discussed in the open here, and I know you said your music tastes aren't very modern, but we did Toby Keith games for every SEC head coach, which is the "How do you like me now" game for every current SEC head coach. Okay. And it's something we talked about on the pod for a bit now, and we'll bring it up kind of within the context of when we think it happens. I'm putting you on the spot again, but I'm curious if you agree with me on the one that I had for Brian Kelly, because for me, his "How do you like me now" game is 2022 Bama. Would you? And you can include Notre Dame, you can include Cincinnati, you can include Central Michigan, Grand Valley State, for all I care. Like any that come to mind, who would you pick, or what would you pick?
So you're talking about like a game? Kirk Cousins validation, like, you like that? Like, yes, like how? Okay. I'm just making sure I understand the context here. Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, right? Like that was the ultimate proof of concept for maybe some of the potential of the Kelly era. I mean, he takes over a team that has 39 scholarship players, and through mass portaling and clinging on to whatever the recruiting class that you could in Death Valley, where this is a weird thing about the Alabama LSU series. LSU never wins a game in Death Valley, ever. They only, when they do win occasionally, it's always in Tuscaloosa for whatever reason. So to beat Alabama in Death Valley, and Alabama featuring Bryce Young and Will Anderson, and to do it in such exciting fashion, going for 2, last play of the game, nuts on the line, executed perfectly. Yeah, that was like, okay, he's immediately beloved. Then it ends up getting you an SEC West title. I mean, really, year one would have been a pretty unreal success had they not lost the A&M game. That pushed you to 10-4 versus 11-3, where 11-3 would have sounded. It just sounds a little sexier than does 10-4. But I mean, you look, dude, back-to-back 10-win seasons. Pretty much with his 24 class, he answers, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but he answers any real recruiting questions that you had coming in. The defensive coaching staff makeover of the offseason. The Brian Kelly / LSU stock is hot right now in the streets. It has been a favorable news cycle after favorable news cycle for them.
I want to talk about that because it's crazy to think that it's year 3 already of the Kelly era. And we know the recent track record for LSU coaches, year 3, where Coach O wins a national title year 3. Les Miles obviously wins a national title year 3, which you probably remember as an innocent 18-year-old who was probably having like, I don't know, 10,000 calories a day during that redshirt year. That's just what I imagine. I think, wait, do you want to go into your diet?
Seeds on the sideline. I would, because you're not going to play. So I would attach gloves to my belt, and I was a big LSU fan, so I'd attach gloves to my belt, load those things down with seeds right when the game starts, throw my helmet behind the bench, and I'd just be sitting there like a fan with the best seat in the house, just fucking chilling, eating seeds. It was awesome.
That's incredible. I used to do that, like watching Blackhawks games from the comfort of my couch, like circa 2010. It was a big time for sunflower seeds back in the day. But like, so like, this track record of what we're talking about in year 3, and expectations. It's just natural. I think Kelly is exactly at the hope and expectation for where we thought he would be, where if you added one extra thing to either of those seasons that he's had so far, I think you would say that he's above expectation. And if you take away either the Bama win in 22 or the Jaden Heisman season, and he's probably below it, where do you think his approval rating is at with what's been a really favorable news cycle for him?
I would say that It's a very shrewd analysis of the tenure thus far. And I hadn't really thought about it in that manner, but I think you're pretty damn spot on there in terms of kind of landing right on that line due to a couple of big moments, which erased some frustrations. I mean, certainly the defensive debacle was completely awful this last year. But as you said, the Jaden Heisman kind of balances those scales. And going into the offseason, though, it looked like Matt House was going to be retained. That was going to be awful. But then not only do you not retain him, but you go and get a guy that was really the fan favorite for the job in Blake Baker. And then you go and get Bo Davis from Texas for $1.5 million a year, which thought to be like impossible. And you hire Kevin Peoples. And so you have a, it's weird. Approval rating right now, sky high, because like I said, everything's going well. Overall, I would still say in the black. Like, yes, the majority of people are happy with him, and it's hard not to see why. I mean, it's back-to-back 10-win seasons. You're establishing you're trying to establish like LSU's always had the really high points, but they've never been one of the schools that is consistently always like in the top 5. Like 10 wins every single year. He's trending towards making the school into that. There's a lot of reason to be excited about next year. And then again, I feel like this recruiting class really came together in a nice way and answered a lot of questions. And then the 25 class is like crazy right now. It's so far away, but it's still adding to the overall positivity. So let's be clear. The bar is national championship for Brian Kelly into ultimately whether or not he will be accepted and championed as a success. But in that climb to that national championship, I think he does have the potential to bring more consistency and sustainability to the program. And he's been saying since day one that year 3 is when that process really starts to pop. And I do feel like if you looked at the progress of LSU from when he took over to now, progress is never linear, right? So if you zoom out, it's been a consistent upward climb. But zooming in, you'll see some peaks and valleys, some steps back. But overall, I feel like everything's heading in the right direction for sure.
Well, we remember Matt House as being just as bad as Bo Pelini, or is that not fair because at least Matt House had a decent year 1?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, man. No, I feel like the really bad year is going to overshadow what was a decent year 1. And that's just kind of the name of the game, dude, right? In some ways, it's almost like Pelini was more palatable because it was just so clearly Pelini at a point was just saying, fuck it, fuck all of you. I'm doing my shit. Like, you got to pay me. It is what it is. I kind of feel bad for House in a way because I think he was really trying everything he knew, but for whatever reason, the players very obviously did not like him. The scheme was not translating. It was god-awful defense. And then you have the added frustration of wasting a championship offense, which certainly Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, I mean, watch where these guys go in the draft. That was absolutely a championship caliber offense that was dragged down by the albatross that was the LSU defense. So, like, no, that's unfortunately the Matt House era at LSU will be remembered like Bo Pelini's.
When we talked last year, all the talk was about the decision to move Harold Perkins into this off-ball linebacker role, and the final numbers of his usage ended up being pretty troubling if you look at it on PFF, where he had 291. That was the snaps in coverage compared to just 162 rushing the passer, which is like essentially 2-to-1. And that's crazy to think about for somebody that rushes the passer as well as he did. The positive was, and I think this is the launching point where Blake Baker can actually look at this and say, like, okay, I can utilize his skill set, but just in a different way. It was almost even in terms of lining up in the box on the defensive line or at that slot corner spot where you can still blitz from there too. I think that's great, but you're not disguising looks with him in the way that you had hoped with Matt House. That should be different with Blake Baker. Kelly deserves a little bit of the blame for the Matt House stuff because he signed off on that move, and I remember talking about it after the opener. So now he brings in this guy who, in theory, runs these exotic blitzes, and we should have the best version of Harold Perkins. What is your hope that he is going to be this upcoming season? Is it simply that he is the guy that we saw terrorize this conference in the latter half of his true freshman season, or is it more of the player that we saw last year?
No, I mean, no, he needs to have an impact again in the way they used to. And credit to him, he is so athletic and so good that on defense that didn't have a pulse, he still was the only player that would flash occasionally. And if you want to look for the silver line in a bad situation, it's kind of to your point. Like, he ended up grading out very well in coverage. So, he grows a lot in this last year in that area of the game. So that's now a skill set that you can fall back on. I still think it's fucking stupid to have a 2-to-1 coverage to rush ratio if we just don't want to pull any punches here. Right? I mean, you have this resource and you're just like, we're not going to use it. It's so I would imagine, and look, you hear some things about maybe like Perkins camp wanting him to kind of switch those positions to maybe like increase draft stock or something or another. I don't know if that's true because that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't think he looks like a more attractive NFL prospect doing that than he does just being, like you said, just terrorizing the offense. But I do think, look, like you said, you develop a coverage skill set, develops knowledge of multiple different positions over this last year. These are elements you can carry forward into what should be, hopefully, a renaissance year for Harold Perkins. Like, I would point you to Damone Clark, who, granted, he was an inside linebacker under Blake Baker, but he was awful. Whatever year that was, 2020, I think, under Pelini. Yeah, with Pelini, he was awful. Like, some of the worst middle linebacker film I've ever seen. Blake Baker comes in to coach linebackers. The next year, Damone Clark ends with like 130 tackles. He's a first-team All-American. I think he ended up getting drafted. Was it first round? When did Damone Clark end up getting?
I thought he was a day 2 guy.
Maybe let me look. But like he 176. Yeah, so round 5. But still, a guy that was not even on the NFL's radar a year before and now plays. So Blake Baker paid huge dividends with him. You'd imagine he'd be able to do the same with Harold Perkins. And really, that's a lot of the excitement is whenever you evaluate a coach, you want to say, okay, I'm looking at the ingredients they have. Are they elevating them? Are they cooking a special meal or are they dragging them down? And I think there's no doubt that the staff last year was like anytime I see people that have done in the past, it's something they can't do it. But, well, what's it? How do we try to make sense of that? And I think clearly the coaching was having a net negative effect on this team last year. So I'm looking for a lot of individuals to look pretty drastically better than they did last season.
I feel like the secondary last year was such an obvious weakness coming into the season, and it ended up being very much confirmed. And I'm actually not as worried about that for LSU coming into this year with the pieces that they return. They bring back the guy that they got from Ohio State the year before who got hurt right before the season.
Yeah, J.K. Johnson.
Yeah, and like they should be in a much better spot with some of those guys that got significant reps. And if they're just not in some of the spots that they were in last year, that should be improved. But the defensive line, it's going to be a question, even though you bring in Bo Davis. What's your concern level for that group, even if they are going to be put in better spots, but just knowing that Mason Smith didn't come back in the way that many expected him to after what felt like kind of a lost season and obviously losing somebody like Mekhi Wingo.
Yeah, again, Connor, I got to commend you. I think very shrewd analysis. It's hard when you talk about all the teams like you do to be this in touch with what kind of the local breakdowns of the team are, but I think you're spot on because I too am not really worried about secondary. I think Corey Raymond's going to bring a lot in that regard, and I'm blanking on the new safeties coach, but he's kind of viewed as like a young up and comer. This is his first like position coach opportunity, right? Those guys are kind of exciting sometimes. And like Kelly said the other day, he's like, we have like 17 or maybe it was 18 like scholarship DBs. Like somebody's going to step up. Like he's not going to the portal, right? They have no interior defensive linemen. I think they have 3 guys on scholarship right now. Really, the zombie hand coming out of the Matt House grave was the fact that it results in Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith leaving for the NFL. And Mekhi Wingo right there with Harold Perkins as one of those guys that was an All-American the year before and then awful this year. And how do you make sense of that, right? And then Mason Smith, somebody with all the potential in the world, career gets kind of upset by injuries, and you would have thought nobody would have been better helped by coming back to LSU and learning Bo Davis and Mason Smith would. But I don't know if it was like the timing of the move. Maybe Smith was just done. But the Smith thing's interesting because, like, I think he's actually taking a financial risk. I'm used to guys leaving early back in the day where it's just like, look, I got to go make money. Even if I can be a higher draft pick, I got to get paid. Like, I don't know that Mason Smith will make a team. He may, because he's such a physical freak, but like where he gets drafted, he might be making less than what he was making at LSU. So I'm kind of shocked that he decided to do that. I hope he does make it because his potential was through the roof pre-injury. And I don't think he was put in positions to succeed. So anyway, they have like 3 guys, and that's the big question mark. You know, how much can you coach a group up? They're talking about cross-training some guys, some of the bigger DNs. They're talking about maybe working some O-linemen over to D-line. But even then, I've seen plenty of D-linemen become incredible offensive linemen. I've never seen it work the other way, at least beyond just maybe a rotational guy. Like, I've never seen an O-lineman go play D-line to be incredible, and that's because generally D-linemen are more athletic. And so they translate better making that switch. So, I mean, certainly they're going to put their thumb on the scale for the spring second transfer portal window. Like, if any interior defensive lineman becomes available, I think LSU will be, there first in line saying, hey, come on down. But that is the major Achilles heel of this entire team right now. Otherwise, the roster's pretty damn nice, pretty much in every other regard.
Are you saying that you could not have at any point during your college career said, you know what, guys, I realize you need some help on the interior defensive line. Yeah. Let me just swing over there and see how that goes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, and it's funny because one of my buddies who would go on to be an All-American offensive lineman, Will Blackwell, was initially a defensive end coming out of high school. And we tried to tell him, bro, you're white. It's not going to happen. The curse of Chase Pittman at LSU, like, just go ahead and speed it up. Just come on over here from the jump. And sure enough, year later, he's on the O-line. And he ends his senior year as an All-American. My guy, Joe Barksdale, was one of the biggest defensive recruits in the entire country. He switched to O-line a year in, and he goes on to be All-SEC, shuts down Von Miller in the Cotton Bowl, plays in the NFL for 7 years. So, again, I've seen it work a ton that direction. I've literally don't think I've ever seen it work the other way.
I think one of the most disappointing units of the 2020 so far is the LSU defense. Like, it's in that conversation.
Fair.
It has to be. Like, A&M's offense is part of that. Ultimately, I went with Florida's defense because they didn't even have the one good year. I mean, it's just been a disaster.
You could just extend that to the Florida program as a whole. It's kind of a bummer. I mean, Graham Mertz put up some okay stats last year, but it's wild, the fall of Florida.
The Trask offense in 2020 still like put up a lot of points.
Oh, I forgot that was 2020. Yeah, they were awesome. That's true.
Not against LSU on that day, but we all remember a certain thrown shoe being a part of it. But like, how crazy is that to think about? Because I mean, for so long it was just set it and forget it with the LSU defense, and it's been more of like a systemic problem that they continue to struggle with this. And there's hope now that it changes, but man, it hasn't been what it once was. And I think that's an understatement.
Yeah. I mean, for damn near 20 years from the Saban era through 2019. So yeah, 2019, you're talking about one of the premier groups in the entire country. I mean, with dogs on them, NFL dogs all over the field year after year, the creation of DBU in the Corey Raymond era, which was more of a moniker being applied than it was the DBs picking it up then, right? Because technically, like, Corey Raymond never coached Pat P, Tyrann Mathieu, Corey Webster, Randall Gay, like the list goes on and on and on and on. So it's one of the more infinitely frustrating and cosmically ironic and cruel things that all of a sudden you've had 2 Heisman winners in 5 years at a place that used to be the fucking elephant graveyard for quarterbacks. Like, the place where quarterbacks would go to just die buried under unfulfilled potential. And now you're awesome there. And you finally see all the skill players like just thriving. And now you can't figure it out defensively. And if you can ever marry the two, then that's how Kelly would obviously finally achieve that consistency that has eluded every LSU coach thus far.
Let's close with the conversation about the quarterback. I think the ceiling for Nussmeier is Carson Beck, Mac Jones level, where you can tell this is someone who had to wait his turn, and by year 4, he's kind of chomping at the bit. You don't talk about some of the first year mistakes with him because it's like, all right, this guy was draft eligible last year. But I think the floor for him and his style, and I think we even saw a little bit of this, is like a 2018 Jake Bentley, or like a Felipe Franks at Florida, where like some of these decisions, man, you're like, the talent is there. I have
not heard in a long time.
Is that fair? Like a fair scale for Nuss?
I mean, it's not an unfair scale, but let me tell you, if you turn in Jake Bentley numbers after a Heisman year, ooh, that's going to not feel great to the fan base. That will create heat. I mean, we know in this business, the objective results are not actually what determines the temperature of a fan base. It's all about where the results land in relation to the expectation. And the expectation for Nuss is not to be Jaden Daniels, but it is to kick ass. And look, I'll say this. I came away very impressed from the bowl game. And it's not the raw stats, which are nice, right? 395, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Great. It's the situational success. Going down 14 points at 2 different times in the game. Getting the ball back with 6 minutes left, needing a touchdown and having to stare down 98 yards of field, right? And then going and making it happen and leading a game-winning drive. Like, that's why I come away very bullish about the potential of Garrett Nussmeier. It has nothing to do with nearly throwing for 400. And I don't like to say this way because it feels derogatory. And quite frankly, I love this guy. I love Miles Brennan. And I think one of the saddest stories about LSU is Miles Brennan's career being derailed by multiple crazy injuries. But if you don't win that game, then you're going to be viewed like Miles was, right? Where, yeah, he put up crazy stats against Mississippi State, but he fucking lost. He put up crazy stats against Mizzou, but you lost, right? And so it's like, or he didn't win it. It doesn't matter. But the point is, like, him getting that win was actually critical, I think, to getting a firm chokehold on that job and letting the coaches and fans know that, look, no, the moment will not be too big. You got a guy who's going to score high in the intangible department. And hopefully he'll have a better defense behind him, right? Because that's the craziest thing about what Jaden did last year is he managed to shoulder the burden of that defense and never feel like he was pressing. Maybe outside of the Florida State game to open up the year, like he did a good job of executing throughout, which is crazy because every single drive last season, it felt like if you don't score, you're done. Like, because you'll just lose pace. And so Nuss should at least have potentially a substantial amount of that burden lifted, which would kind of even out whatever regression you see, in theory at least. And the hope would be that would even out whatever regression you're going to see going from a Heisman winner who had the best statistical season we've seen out of any Heisman winner since like the 70s to Garrett Nussmeier.
Don't tell Joe Collette that he did that, but yeah, we don't need to go down that road with Jaden.
Who was Collette on? Was Collette on Penix? Who is he on?
He was on Penix post playoff game and saying that retroactively Penix deserved the Heisman over Jaden Daniels, who did not play.
I mean, look, I love Penix. I was a big Husky boy all last couple of years. And speaking of cruel irony, now the guy that I championed for the last couple of years in charge at Alabama. Yeah, I mean, look, I think how we evaluate the Heisman is pretty stupid. I think we're all prisoners of the moment. I think it's a quarterback award, almost exclusively. I think we use all sorts of shifting targets, and I don't think that's the worst thing. Actually, I shouldn't say it's stupid. I think sometimes there are things where not having the most codified set of rules is not a disadvantage, because it does allow you to kind of, through the power of social democracy, kind of chip away and sculpt and hammer out, okay, you know what? I think this is actually the winner this year. And like, there was a very specific set of circumstances that led to Jaden Daniels winning that. And it's kind of how it was arrived at. So that's, I guess it's actually not the, when I say stupid, I should have just said, if you're coming there looking for consistency in how we award it, like, you're not going to find it. Right. And that's fine. And that's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily.
If we're having conversations about Garrett Nussmeier as it relates to the Heisman Trophy, would be, I think, everything LSU fans could have hoped and dreamed for. I'll say this, though, just because this has already gotten going a little bit. If you watch the bowl game, like you heard this stuff too. I can't get on board with the Nuss Bus. The nickname. Garrett Nussmeier as a player
It's
been
around for years, though, dude. It's not going anywhere.
But here's the thing. It's too similar to the Gus Bus. It's way too similar. And that already came and went through the SEC, okay? And it's gone. It's in my neck of the woods in Orlando now. Can I commission you and Hester, two bright, very creative minds, two of the best minds that we have in our sport? Just a new nickname. That's all I need. Like, instead of Gunslinger, maybe it's Nusslinger. I don't know. Like, just something that isn't Nuss Bus. I just don't think it works.
I don't know. I got my CDL, me. So you might be coming the wrong place, dude. When I back up, you hear beep, beep, beep. No, look, Nuss Bus ain't going anywhere. I mean, what's funny is it became a rallying cry because many wanted the Nuss Bus over Jaden Daniels last year.
Yep.
Going into the year. So it's too firmly entrenched at this point, and I don't mind it. Nusslinger ain't bad. And Nuss We Trust is another fun one. But nah, you're gonna have to make peace with that one.
All right, fair. That's fair. One last thing. Have we ever seen Nuss and Jake Crane in the same room? Is that
they actually? Oh my God, I have never
really
considered this.
Do the side by side,
dude. Okay, especially his team pick.
Yeah,
his Nuss's team pick is unreal. Jake Crane energy. Holy shit. That's actually crazy. Wow. No, I've never noticed that before. It's his team picture, especially. Like, there's some other ones on here I'm not seeing. The team picture's a damn near spitting image of just Jake when he would have been college age.
Yeah, I thought it was Jake like the first time, and the first time that I saw his bio, and I was like, wait a minute, because it's when he's got like the bangs down or something like that,
bangs,
where it's,
and he's kind of got that like those eyebrows, those kind of arched eyebrows, and the kind of like upturned like lip or maybe downturned. I don't know. That's crazy. I never considered that, Connor. Wow.
Just blew your mind on a Thursday morning. That's just how we do it, man.
It's my birthday tomorrow.
Is it really? So by the time people are listening to this, it'll be your birthday. Wish T-Bob a happy birthday.
35.
Everybody you already follow him on Twitter. How do you feel about
this?
that?
I'm so fucking pumped, dude, because today, World of Warcraft Season of Discovery Phase 2 dropping, level cap raised to 40. Let's go, boys. Raid tonight in BFD. Let's go. Hoping for some good loot for the birthday. We'll see.
I have no idea what you just said. I'm going to. You are in a different world than I am.
Hit me up on the Lava Lash server. I'm a dwarf priest, T-Bob. If you need some gear award, I'm your man.
Do you want to give out your chess name? Do you play people online in chess too?
Shit, do I play people online in chess? I just had a call yesterday with chess.com. I'm going to be commentating their Blitz Champ series, which are college football players playing chess tournaments. Fuck yeah. T-Bob 53 on chess.com. I ain't scared. Hit me up.
College football players playing chess. What is that? What is that market?
Chess. Look at this. You know I stay ready. If you're listening, I just panned over in my office to my two chess sets. One Lord of the Rings kind of decorative fun set and one just classic travel set. No, look, chess.com is the largest chess app in the world, largest chess website in the world, hundreds of millions of subscribers. And they do incredible content. Yesterday watching Herbstreit-Raiola versus Magnus Carlsen in the finals was incredible. And then, it's kind of insane to think that I'm going to be commentating with actual chess GMs, and I'm shit. But I'm going to be commentating with actual chess GMs covering chess. I have to pinch myself. It's like a true dream come true.
College football players playing chess is not anything I ever thought would be.
It's called Blitz Champs. They do NFL tournaments as well. I can't remember who won the first Blitz Champs. Joe Burrow is very famously a massive chess.com player. He was playing games right before the AFC Championship that he beat Pat Mahomes in a couple of years ago. There's the Blitz Champs is their NFL version where they get football players and college players to compete in tournaments. Like last Blitz Champs, there's Larry Fitzgerald, Kayvon Thibodeau, Mari Cooper, Will Davis, Rick Armstead, and others. And they're doing it with colleges too now, where I'm going to be commentating Maryland. Like a bunch of the Maryland players are going to get together. I guess Michigan played a tournament, like they've done it like that. So I'm pumped. They do Pog Champs, which are streamers playing chess. The chess community online is incredible. It's the absolute best.
As versatile as they come. T-Bob, you're the best, man. Appreciate it. We'll do it again soon.
All right, Connor. Later, man.
So in case you missed it, Georgia fans definitely did not miss it, but Kirk Herbstreit told Dominic Raiola, the dad of former Georgia quarterback commits and eventual Nebraska flip Dylan Raiola, that guy, Kirby advised to flip from Georgia to Nebraska. And if you didn't hear what happened with this or like the context of it, we're going to go through all of it because Dylan Raiola's dad, Dominic Raiola, went on Rivals and shared this quote. He said, "When this was happening, I'll bring up one guy's name. His name is Kirk Herbstreit. When he saw the smoke about Dylan entertaining Nebraska, he was like, call me. He was like, dude, if this is true, he's got to do it. His affinity for Nebraska, for a guy like that to tell me and get behind me, I knew he needed to do it, but I wasn't going to sit here and say, you need to go change that place or be a part of the change of that place. So when Kirk told me that, I was like, man, I had other coaches reach out and say the place is special and Coach Rule is a special leader." Close quote. Okay, so a lot of people will look at what Herbie did and say, what's the problem? This is a guy who gets paid a lot of money to provide his opinion. There's nothing wrong with this. Herbstreit probably has people that reach out to him all the time, maybe coaches saying, hey, should I take this job? Should I do this, or this? He has a big, big influence. The problem isn't that he has this opinion, right? Like, no fault whatsoever. If Herbstreit goes on ESPN and someone asks him, like, it's College Football Live or something like that, or Game Day or some sort of programming like that, and it's a question that's asked to Herbie, hey, what would you do if you were Dylan Raiola? If he said, I would flip from Georgia to Nebraska because of all those reasons that were outlined, be a part of something special, Matt Rule, all those different things. If he says that in that context, it's received entirely different than the way that it is received in this context. And I can guarantee you that Herbstreit did not want this information to get out there, that he had said to Dominic Raiola, hey, call me. Here's what I think he should do. He's got to do it. It's the fact that Herbstreit, with his influence, felt the need to initiate this contact with one of the highest rated recruits in college football and said, you're waffling on a decision. Here's what I think you should do. There are ethical questions that are rightfully being asked about this. And I have banged the drum for Herbie before that I think he gets too much crap for his biases, and people say he defaults to Ohio State here or this program here. And yeah, you can probably pick and choose certain instances in which he doesn't hold this team accountable or that team accountable, whatever. But when you are letting your influence, and you are hoping that your influence is going to impact a decision like this for a kid that is trying to make up his mind in this moment, that's where, to me, you've crossed the line. And I thought in this instance, like, Herbie crossed the line. He did. And he might not admit that. He's kind of at, like, in I don't care mode because he kind of walks on water at ESPN. And that's why he's still able to get into Twitter fights with FSU fans, which is, in my opinion, it should be beneath him, but he's still doing that. Whatever. It's his own social media. I guess he can do what he wants there. But in this context, I think it's kind of messed up. And it's not just because Georgia fans are already frustrated with ESPN over the Pollock McAfee stuff and the way that has all played out. McAfee, after they lose the SEC championship, is like, Georgia fans, you can go to hell. Like, it's not because of that.
Sorry.
But Georgia fans are already not happy with ESPN. And now the fact that Herbstreit, the face of ESPN college football, maybe the face of college football as a whole, is on record with having an influence like this for a move that is going to be so significant. This is, to me, a bridge too far. And why I think, even as somebody on the outside looking in, I have a problem with it, with the ethics behind it. And people say, like, oh, freedom of speech, blah, blah, blah. Freedom of speech doesn't mean that you have the freedom to say whatever you want without consequences. That's the biggest thing. I'm telling you that as a journalist, all right? Like, a capital J journalist. But
Herbstreit scared
Herbstreit
to hug Toby Keith because he was in Big J mode.
I don't know that. Yeah, maybe that was part of it. Yeah, maybe that was a little bit part of it. But like, I think Herbie messed up, and I don't know if he's going to admit it or not. But to me, that's not what his influence should be used for. Yeah, he's probably not going to. Like, he's probably not going to. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to this. Number one, I mean, if you're one of these conspiracy theorists thinking that ESPN's pushing the SEC agenda, is a pretty rough day for you.
It goes against that. It definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah. Number two, it does push the agenda of ESPN's a little bit too involved in this whole thing, I think. And yeah, I think that, and you know, Pollock has been super cool to us. I think that to be more problematic than Pat McAfee is hard to do, but I feel like he's found the way to do that.
Let's leave the Pollock stuff out of this. I
know, but I'm talking about Georgia fans. I'm talking about their perspective on this. And it does matter because, you know, I can see as a Georgia fan how you feel like ESPN is treating you differently from how Alabama was treated. I get it. Because at the end of the day, you know, you got Nick Saban on the set, you know, signing these deals, doing all this stuff, yucking it up with the boys in his blue suit. And that's the point I was making, is that you feel like you don't really have that level of representation. You don't have that level of, okay, we're going to respect Georgia. In fact, you have the opposite. I mean, could you imagine Kirk Herbstreit calling, you know, Bryce Young and being like, you know, I think you should go to USC if you're from out there. I don't know why you're thinking about Alabama. That's insane to me. All of this is insane to me. I think that, you know, if Herbie is so good at his job of being a couple of things, which is, you know, an on-air host / a play-by-play guy. The promised land of on-air media is to be an opinion guy. And I think that Kirk Herbstreit, as an opinion guy, not as... Go ahead.
He is a call it like I see it guy. He has prided himself on being that. And even if you don't agree with his opinion, and I don't agree with his opinion on the Florida State playoff stuff, but he is entitled to that, to have that opinion. And that is okay. Where it crosses the line to me is when you are not the person that is just being consulted for advice. If Dominic Raiola says, you know what, I wonder how Herbstreit feels about this. And he calls him up and he's like, look, honest opinion, man. What should my kid do? What should my kid do? And Herbie's like, yeah, you know, I think you should do this. Different. Entirely different. But Herbstreit took the initiative. And he went out of his way to say, call me. He's got to do it. He's got to flip. That is if you want to pat someone on the back for a college commitment, hey, think you really ended up in the right place.
Right.
Think you did
That's
what's going to benefit.
Different.
Totally different story. But to me, you can't pride yourself on being the call it like you see it guy, which Herbstreit has built a 3-decade-long successful career on, and then do things like that, and then expect people not to bring that stuff up. That's the issue.
Yes, and we have compared, we talked about quality of life in the landscape of college football. We talked about Herbie and Stephen A. Smith as two guys that are working really hard, and they're kind of at the top of their industry, where there's a big difference between those two guys. Stephen A. Smith is a content creator. He is a person who creates stories. His opinions go out, and that is the story. Kirk Herbstreit is a content accentuator, okay? And he's one of the best potentially the best in the business at that. But don't get it twisted. If you're Kirk Herbstreit, you are not a content creator. It is not your role. It is not your job to go interfere with the landscape of college football and create a story. We like you because of your perceived objectivity, right? Even as an SEC guy, I can say you're a former Ohio State quarterback, but I respect you because I know that you're not going to give Ohio State preferential treatment. Well, when you go to bat for Nebraska, I mean, it's one thing to call the guy and say Ohio State, at least you're helping out your alma mater. What has Nebraska done for you?
Herbstreit's doing the thing that I hate, Will. He's doing the college football would be better if traditional program were good.
Yeah.
And that is, in my opinion, even tougher to stomach if this were a story where Desmond Howard is trying to get this guy to his alma mater, which, look, I'm sure Desmond Howard does plenty of that for Michigan.
Sure
he doesn't hide his Michigan stuff.
Yeah.
Get your biases out there. Let them be known. But if you're doing this behind closed doors and we find out about it from somebody else, that's a tough thing, man. That is a tough thing. And like, Herbstreit's going to be looked at in a different way. Like, I continue to say he is in a different spot than I think he was even 3-4 years ago. and how he's being perceived. And especially now when these media contracts are so aligned with specific conferences.
Yep.
And so, yes, while you are no longer aligned with the Big Ten at ESPN, that is something that is going to combat some of that bias. I get that. If you are a guy that says sport is better as a whole when this happens, and I'm going to do what I can to make this, that's where you're like, wait, so what? You did what? That is a place where I am in agreement that fans should be ruffled by that, and that it shouldn't sit particularly well that he is using his influence in that way.
Yes, I'm so glad that was literally going to be my next point, is that's the worst type of fan, is like national person who's like usually mainly an NFL fan that comes in and says, I'd just love it if Miami and USC were good. It's like, dude, I don't care. They need to get their crap together if they want to be good. They're not special. I enjoy watching Iowa. That's a bad example. I enjoy watching Utah. Okay. I don't enjoy watching Iowa. I enjoy watching Utah. But point being, the brands like, okay, it almost validates two different conspiracies. And like I said, if you're a Georgia fan before this, I would be going, because a lot of this is Georgia being compared, like I said, to Alabama, and us talking. A lot of our conversations with Georgia fans is them going, like the thing that Cook said the other day, where he's like, this is all a conspiracy, where they knew Saban was going to retire. You saw that, right?
Yes, saw that. Not really one to go down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, but you open the door for that stuff when you
That's
do
exactly
stuff like
what I'm
this.
saying. That's exactly what I'm saying, is that if you're going to say, like, if we're going to sit here all day and be like, hey guys, there's no conspiracy against Georgia, and that's why I brought the polar stuff. It's like, no, there's a reason for this. Like, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for this. Like, it's not this. It's not this. And then you have Herbstreit going, dog, decommit. It's crazy to say, because it validates the one conspiracy that they hate Georgia, and us, we have to go, yeah, that's kind of a conspiracy. And then the other end of it, it's the national media, like you said, saying, looking out for themselves, looking out for the product and making this more commercialized. And again, that one's not a conspiracy as far as networks influencing stuff, as far as the big brands coming to the top, and when you see someone who has nothing to financially gain from this, like, it's one thing if it's the ESPN executives saying we'd rather if Nebraska was good, but what do you care, Herbstreit? It's not like you get a bigger check if Nebraska's good. You just kind of want that, I guess, because you have this vision of how you want the sport to be. And hey, guess what? You guys are making the sport the way you want it enough. All right.
I feel like Herbstreit, there have been so many times I've watched him on College Game Day over the years where I can see the wheels spinning in his head of, if he says this, then this is how that will be perceived. And I think he is usually so good at that. But there have just been a few of these instances. Maybe it's because he has such a high standard for that there have just been a few of these instances where I'm like, man, those wheels aren't spinning the same way that they were before. And that can be a problem. That can be a problem when you have that type of audience, that type of influence, and how well known you are and how you're now going to be perceived in the sport, where your reputation is everything at this point. Okay. It just is, with all the platforms that he's on. But yeah, I thought it was worth bringing up because I know a lot of Georgia fans, a lot of people just in college football as a whole kind of have opinions on it. And if you're coming at me with the pro, like you're a Nebraska fan, like, sit this one out.
Welcome to the national conversation. Good to have you. Anyway, so point being, like, no, but again, if you're a Georgia fan, you're right. Like, you're right. This is bad, and feels like a conspiracy, dog. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah. All right, jersey contest. I saved it for you. Who is the best Cub that I can have on this jersey that I'm rocking? I'm rocking a blue Cubs jersey. Who is the best person that you could see when I turn around and show you my back? And I'll give you a hint. Man. He is not currently on the Cubs, but he is currently in Major League Baseball.
Oh, okay. Well, guess number one, Schwarber. Come on. Our guy.
You knew it. You just knew it. Yep. Schwarber is my guy. Like, in every possible way. Indiana guy, was living in Nebraska when he was in the College World Series, drove the 2 hours, 45 minutes to be able to see him play on that stage. Cubs draft him. So excited. Like,
Chonk, lad,
Schwarber,
big happy boy.
He's everything I wish I could be. It's so many ways. Like, I even did the whole, like, oh, I'm a catcher. No, I'm going to go play in the outfield thing, like in high school. And obviously not to the success that Schwarber was able to do in Major League Baseball. But yeah, my brother actually won it. My brother got us like 3 wedding presents or something. He was way too generous. He really was. But he got myself and Lauren both Schwarber jerseys. And so I've had this since, I got it 2016, like right before their run to the World Series, and wore it to death during October. And it was, I don't want to say a good luck charm. No, I do want to say it was a good luck charm. Very much so, brought the good vibes. And I love Schwarber, and my uncle would always text my brother and I, because he was not a Schwarber guy. Schwarber sucks whenever he'd go 0 for 4 with 4 Ks. And my brother and I would always text him whenever he would, hit a 460-foot bomb, and he'd be like 2 for 4 with a couple of homers, and like, Schwarber sucks. And we would say the same thing back to him because he doesn't, and he clearly doesn't. And the fact that the Cubs couldn't find, $8 million to be able to pay him is just the most maddening thing ever, because all of the teams that he's on are freaking good, and it's not an accident. And it's because he is the ultimate vibes guy. I love Schwarber. I will always root for him. He's the absolute man. I will wear this jersey with pride, even though he is sadly no longer on the Cubs.
Yeah, that's a guy we connected over early. I loved him as well for the aforementioned reasons. And again, plays the game in a very entertaining way. He's not going to have a lot of routine. He's not a bunter, that Schwarber. You know what I'm saying?
Bunting sucks, and so does anyone who thinks it's good. All right,
correct. Yeah, getting rid of the or like kind of adding the DH, I think was good. Again, I'm not an NL baseball guy, but I think that having more Schwarbers out there is good. So point being, and I guess there's only one Schwarber, right? But yeah, I think that's super cool. My first guess was going to be Arrieta because you guys look a little similar, but Schwarber would have been number 2.
When I grow out the beard at uncomfortable, get food stuck in it lengths, I can pull off the Arrieta thing just from a facial profile thing. Mm-hmm. The physical attributes, he is insanely yoked. Yoked to levels that you're like, people always assumed that because of when he blew up that he was on steroids, because he's also, in ridiculous shape. But yeah, I've heard the Arrieta comparison when the beard is very, very long. Actually, when the Cubs were in the midst of the World Series run, and I really grew it out because, playoff beard, maybe that's a little bit more of a hockey thing, but had to go for it. And that was when I was feeling my most Arrieta like. But no, Schwarbo, that's my guy, man. God,
he's a king. And unfortunately, the Phillies are the Phillies, right? Like, it's hard to root for the Phillies. I fully understand it, but the silver lining is we get to see him in these postseason runs, and he deserves it. I think that I think baseball is good when he's in the postseason. Let's say it that way. So
that's the take. Well, don't give me this Miami needs to be good for college. College football is better when Miami's good. Major League Baseball is better when Kyle Schwarber is hitting bombs in the playoffs. That's all I know. Okay. Sorry if that makes me a little bit a lazy baseball fan, but it's the God honest truth. Nobody can.
Don't give me the leadoff guy that's going to get you a nice little single that puts you in a better position later in the game. Give me the dude who just hits a nuke on the first pitch while I'm like in the restroom, but I'm like, what? Yes. It's already 1-0. Yes. That's him.
Yes, Schwarber, the absolute best. All right, do you have a Super Bowl prediction for Sunday? Because I was trying to think of one. I was like, God, I don't have to go on record anywhere, so maybe I shouldn't do this, but I'll go Chiefs 24, Niners 20, and Chris Jones, Mississippi State legend, becomes the first defensive lineman to win Super Bowl MVP honors since a certain Richard Dent won it when he was with the 85 Bears.
Yeah, Mississippi State is they have some dudes in the league. They are putting their footprint on the league. The guys that they have are guys. But yeah, I would say Niners 27, Chiefs 24. I think that this feels like the Niners year. I feel like they've, yet to be an underdog in a game. I think McCaffrey's finally healthy, which is a really big deal. I don't think Brock Purdy is any good, but it doesn't seem to matter. Seems like it, again, Wilkes, not any good. Doesn't really feel like it matters. It feels like these guys just have creatures all over the ball. It's a lot.
Think about Isaiah Pacheco running over a Steve Wilkes defense.
Oh no.
That's advantage.
Compelling argument you just made right there.
Yeah. But hopefully everybody is able to enjoy the Super Bowl on Sunday, eats a ton of food. I'm sure we'll have maybe some sort of thoughts on that on Monday. We're going to have a different schedule coming up because I'm going to be going out of town later next week. So kind of explain what that is. We're still going to have our normal episode that comes out next Tuesday morning. Then I'll kind of run through. We're going to change a couple of things just to be able to accommodate our moving schedules. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter, the app formerly known as Twitter, at the SDS Pod, at Set Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.